Hey guys, how are you all? Welcome to Let's Start Story on What If Naruto Was Abandoned by Crimson Knightmare in Naruto X Euphemia Part 2. So do 4 blue hearts comment. Be sure to subscribe to our channel and like this video, and please share with your friends and watch till end. Also check out Patreon, for I have upload Naruto X Rias and Akino uncensored spicy version, link in description. Chaotic. That was the best way to describe the couple of days after Kurama and Zeroes revealed themselves to all of Area 11. All the general public would talk about those 2 days was about the two masked figures, what they had done, and who could possibly be under those masks. Another important piece of information circulating around was the rumor that the second princess of Britannia, Cornelia Lee Britannia, was on her way to Area 11 to become its viceroy and discover the identity of Zero and Kurama. But personally she was more interested in capturing Zero for murdering her half-brother, Clovis. Naruto finished signing some papers on his desk, while the TV in his office once more played the news of the procession before switching to show 2 pictures of Zero and himself in his Kurama disguise, as the reporter once more questioned the identity of the 2 mask-wearing individuals and warned the public about how dangerous they were. Along with they are pictures was a quick list of crimes the two were accused of: Zero the murder of 3rd Prince Clovis and helping Suzaku escape, while Kurama was being charged with obstructing the military and aiding and abetting Zero in his plans of escape. Well, you sure made a spectacular appearance. Amami commented almost uncaringly from her place on the couch. Right now everyone is trying to figure out who is the bigger threat between Zero and Kurama. Zero, the one responsible for Clovis' murder, or you, Kurama, the one some are calling superhuman because of what you did on the bridge. She finished Jew. Saint as the news changed to a video feed showing Kurama deflecting all the bullets from the Sutherlands and moving around, only they were showing it in super slow motion so everyone could see, though EY still hadn't come up with anything that helped explain his Rasengan. So any particular reason you're skipping school, after 1 day? She said, more than asked, in an accusing tone. First of all, I am not skipping. I called the school to let them know I wouldn't be going today. The blonde shinobi began. And just because you called it means that you're not skipping? Amami asked skeptically with a raised eyebrow. Of course it does, Naruto said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. As to the reason I'm not going to school today, it's because today the reconstruction of Shinjuku officially begins. And I want to oversee it personally. He told her, finishing signing the last of the paperwork, for now, and stretched his arms above his head before taking a look at a nearby clock. In fact, we should probably get going now. The sapphire-eyed nightmare pilot finished standing up and making his out of his office. Amami questioned, looking over his shoulder at her. Well, you can either come with me or stay cooped up in here all day, Naruto said before facing forward again. Amami only thought about it for a second before shifting into Q disguise and followed after her former Jinchuriki, grumbling a few unintelligible words as she followed behind him. At Ashford Academy, Lelouch was being forced to entertain an unwanted guest. When the black-haired teen had ved home last night, he was surprised to find the girl from Shinjuku, the same girl who gave him his gyos and who he saw take a bullet to the head, in his home, who called herself CC, sitting at the table beside his sister. Now they were in his room discussing the events of the other night and his plans for the future when a certain question came to mind that he desperately wanted the answer to. CC, Lelouch said, drawing the green-haired girl's attention. What is it? CC replied without looking up from the magazines that were spread out on the bed, as she ate a slice of pizza. Have you given anyone else the power of gyos? He questioned her seriously. The question caught CC by surprise. Out of all the questions that she imagined he would ask her, that was one of the last ones. Looking over at the violet-eyed boy, CC made sure to keep face as neutral as possible so he couldn't see how surprised by his question she was, or the uneasiness that the question managed to generate. Why? She asked him instead, keeping her tone of voice apathetic. Kurama, Lelouch began, a little pissed off that she didn't just answer his question, but considered it better than her just refusing to answer at all. Like she had done with some of his other questions. He was able to do things last night that should be impossible for anyone else. The only way I can rationalize his abilities is he somehow also possessed gyos, and if that's true then he most likely obtained it from you, which means you are my best bet in figuring out his true identity and what other abilities his Geass grants him. Lelouch concluded, staring at the immortal witch expectantly. CC let out a mental sigh of relief. There were some things that Lelouch wasn't ready to learn about just yet. Oh, that's why, she eventually said evenly, turning a page in one of the magazines to show a picture of the kitsune mask-wearing individual that they were talking about. Well, if it makes you feel any better, then no, I didn't give Kurama Geass. CC answered, making sure to choose her words carefully. Not really, Lelouch answered honestly. If CC didn't give Kurama his abilities, then there were only two other likely possibilities. Either Kurama was naturally that fast, and who knew what else, or there was someone else out there who had given him Geass. Neither of the possibilities were pleasant ideas, but one was definitely better than the other. Could someone else have given him Geass? He asked her. CC was quiet for a second as she decided if she should answer him or not. No, she finally said, before turning her attention back to the magazines and ignoring Lelouch completely and enjoying her delicious slice of extra cheese pizza. Seeing that his unwanted guest wasn't about to answer any more of the questions he had, Lelouch turned his own attention back to his computer, as he searched for any information available to the public about the events of the other night, more specifically what happened to Suzaku after he went back to his court marital. Arriving at the site of the reconstruction, Naruto got off his bike, doing his best to ignore Q screaming in his head about his reckless driving. The blonde-haired shinobi took a moment to look at the many destroyed buildings of the once proud city that had been left in ruin because of the war and again because of the massacre that happened there a few days ago. With a final look towards the destroyed Tokyo Metropolitan Government building, he made his way to where a group of people had gathered waiting for him. Moving to stand in front of everyone, he got everyone's attention. Taking a closer look at those who had gathered, Naruto wasn't surprised to see that all those who volunteered to help rebuild Shinjuku were Japanese. Alright, before we get started, I want to make a few things clear. Naruto began, speaking loud enough for everyone to hear. As of this moment, you are all employees of Namikaze Corp, which means that you will all be expected to follow the general procedures for any Namikaze employee. Naruto then went on to explain everything else that would be expected of them while they worked to restore Shinjuku, and had benefits they would have available while the reconstruction was happening. He also assured them that professional construction companies would be hired to deal with anything that was too big or heavy for them to do on their own. But that the first few days would be dealing with removing debris and burying the bodies of those who were killed and still needed to be buried. Now, any questions? He finished. Yeah, I have a question. A voice shouted from the crowd. Turning toward the source of the voice, Naruto found a short-cut brown-haired man with a red bandana around his head, who Naruto recognized as Tamaki. With the other members of the small resistance surrounding him, all of them with exasperated looks on their faces. Why the hell are we listening to a snot-nosed brat like you? We are supposed to believe that the head of this stupid company wants to help us and then sends a kid instead of coming himself. He's obviously making fun of us. How do we know that he's not lying to us? And is just going to take what little we have when we're done fixing everything? Tamaki argued heatedly. That's enough, Tamaki. Ogi muttered reproachfully to his friend, especially since he recognized the teen's features as the ones Colin told him about a few days earlier and was nearly 100% sure about the blonde's identity. Naruto just smiled in amusement before saying something he was sure was going to infuriate the dark brown-haired man. You're quite the hothead, aren't you? Naruto said, making it sound more like a statement than an actual question, as he used the same words he used to describe the man the first time he met him. By the look on Tamaki's face, Naruto's statement got the desired results as the short-tempered Japanese man remembered the last person who said the same thing to him. While his group of friends chuckled to themselves in the background. Why you? Tamaki growled, glaring at whiskered teen. Anyway, I probably should have introduced myself from the beginning. The blonde shinobi said, interrupting the older man and speaking to the crowd. I am Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, and as our friend so elegantly put it, the head of this stupid company. As to his second question, well, I could talk about all the things that Namikaze Corp has done in order to improve living conditions for the Japanese, but at the end of the day you're just going to have to trust me. And believe that I only want to help you all. He paused for a second as he stared at everyone. I want to make one thing perfectly clear though, I am not forcing anyone to work for me and no matter what I will rebuild Shinjuku. If any of you feel you can't trust me enough then you are free to leave. When no one made a move to leave, a smile spread across Naruto's face. Alright then, let's get started. Today we will start working on this area right here. Naruto finished pointing at an area map of Shinjuku that he had set up, as he took off his black cargo jacket revealing his orange shirt and placing it down on one of the nearby tables he had set up, and picked up some of the nearby tools. What are you doing? Ogi questioned the sapphire-eyed pilot curiously. You didn't think that? I was just going to sit back and watch you all work, did you? Naruto asked with an amused expression on his face, already knowing that was exactly what Ogi and everyone else was thinking. Minutes later Naruto had noticed that one of the resistance members, the one that he had saved, Nagata, was having a bit of trouble clearing some of debris, most likely because his injury was still bothering him. Even if it was only a little. Coming up with an idea, Naruto got the black-haired man's attention. Are you alright? Naruto asked him in order to start a conversation. Yeah, Nagata answered uncertainly, a bit uncomfortable with the idea that someone that was about 10 years younger than him was his boss. He didn't have a problem with it, he just found it a bit strange. My shoulder is just a bit sore, he stated, his friends moving in closer wondering what was going on. It seems that it's giving you a bit of trouble. Naruto pointed out, it would probably be best if you didn't strain yourself. The blonde fox nightmare pilot said. So what are you going to do? Force him to leave? Tamaki growled out while the others reprimanded him for his tone. No, nothing like that. Nah. Ruto replied, surprising them a bit with a wave of his hand. I think it would be better if your friend became my assistant here. Assistant? Nagata questioned, astonished. Yeah, as much as I'd like to be here all day every day to help out, I do have other things that I need to do. When that happens, someone needs to be here in charge, making sure that everything is going smoothly. I think it would be best if it was someone they could trust. The sapphire-eyed teen clarified his reasoning. Are you sure about this? The long black-haired man pressed. Are you trying to talk me out of it? Naruto asked him back with a raised eyebrow. No, it's just, what is it that I would have to do? Nagata asked him. Nothing difficult, Naruto reassured him before going into an explanation and moving Tawa Road, one of the tables that held some papers. For the most part you'll be watching over everyone here and directing them. Making sure there are enough supplies and everyone is doing their job. Breaks of course allowed as long as no one abuses their right. Besides that, you will also have some paperwork that will be needed done, but don't worry, it won't be anything difficult and I'll help explain everything. The blonde former Konoha shinobi said, pointing out some of the papers that Nagata would need to complete. And of course you will be paid more for the extra responsibilities. He added in at the end. Nagata thought it over for a second but couldn't see a reason not to agree to Naruto's offer. Alright, I'll do it, Nagata said with a smile. Good. Naruto replied, there is only one thing I need to know before you can get started. What's that? Nagata asked. Well, I really should learn the name of my assistant for this project. Naruto said with a smirk spreading across his face. My name is Nagata Takeshi. He answered, holding out his hand, while his friends silently cheered for their friend. Nice to meet you, Nagata Takeshi, I'm going to be counting to you. The Yulin-eyed shinobi replied with his fox-like grin, as he shook his new assistant's hand. The sun was starting to set on one of the most interesting days that Suzaku had ever had. His day started with him being cleared of all charges in the murder of Prince Clovis. Of course, after Zero's announcement the result was obvious. But his interesting day didn't start until shortly after, when he met a girl. Now this wasn't the normal going out and meeting someone in a socially acceptable place or maybe running into each other like what happened in an anime and manga. Instead he met the girl, Euphemia, as he came to learn she was called. When she jumped out the window of a building, now that he thought about it he guessed that was the sort of thing one would expect from an anime manga. Euphemia had light pink hair that was styled elegantly around her face with a couple of buns on each side of her head that fell down to her waist, a couple long strands of hair that twisted at the tips, and a bangs falling around the right side of her face. She had violet blue eyes and soft cream-colored skin. She wore a long white-sleeved shirt that helped emphasize the size of her breasts with the bottom half being a light green color. And a long orange skirt. Yuffie also had on red-heeled shoes and a red choker around her neck. Her choice of clothes was simple, yet they gave her this defined beauty. Why that many girls would find hard to copy. Since meeting Yuffie, he had escorted the pink-haired girl to different places all over the Tokyo settlement, and Suzaku could honestly say that it had been on of the most enjoyable days he's had in a long time. As a final request, Yuffie had asked him to take her to the Shinjuku ghetto. He didn't understand her reasons for wanting to go, but he had already agreed to take her wherever she wanted to go and wasn't about to go back on his word. So that is how he found himself once more in Shinjuku ghetto, looking at the graves that were erected by the residents that managed to survive. Using whatever they could salvage as headstones, with Yuffie standing beside him looking solemnly at the various graves until a couple of voices broke the silence that had fallen over the two of them. Man, they didn't use RGs on the 11s, I figured they wouldn't. Hey look, those are marks from Hummer rounds, get a clear shot of it. Say cheese. Looking over they two Britannian students standing by a destroyed statue taking pictures of the destruction. What was alarming, and caused Suzaku to move in their direction, were the 3 Japanese men that had cornered the students and had knocked the camera down to the ground, damaging it. The source of the commotion was Tamaki and 2 of his friends and fellow resistance members, Yoshitaka Minami, a man with hort purple hair and wore glasses over his purple eyes, and Toru Yoshida, who had slicked back brown hair that bushed out at the end. Tamaki was yelling at the 2 students to leave, but they refused, causing Tamaki to become angrier. When Suzaku rushed in to keep things from escalating further, Tamaki told him to stay out and swatted at him, knocking the sunglasses Suzaku was wearing off. Once he had a good look at him, Tamaki couldn't help but ask, "Are you, Suzaku Kururugi?" He questioned him while Yoshida and Minami whispered loudly amongst themselves. "This guy is nothing more than a slave, big deal, you're an honorary Britannian, nobody cares. You sold your pride, your people, your soul, yet you call yourself Japanese." Tamaki shouted at the end with a scowl on his face. "No, you're wrong," Suzaku denied. "I am not wrong," the dark brown-headed Japanese resistance member shouted, cutting him off, as he threw a punch at the honorary Britannian. Before anyone knew what was happened, someone caught Tamaki's arm in theirs and twisted it behind his back and forced the proud Japanese man down to his knees. Suzaku noticed that the person responsible was a blonde-haired boy about his age with blue eyes and whisker marks on his cheeks and a frown on his face, as he looked down at the brown-haired man and a small fox on his shoulder. "That's enough," Naruto muttered, his eyes shifting between Tamaki and the other 2 resistance members. "What exactly did you think you were doing?" The whiskered pilot asked no one in particular, before releasing his hold on Tamaki. "It's you, Uzumaki." Suzaku heard one of the students stutter out, making him wonder why they were suddenly so nervous. "Well," Naruto said expectantly, "we were just on a break." Tamaki replied, rubbing his shoulder soothingly. "According to Nagata, you guys went on break about 30 minutes ago." Naruto shot back, causing Tamaki to silently curse his friend. "Not only that, when I finally find you, you're starting a fight." "Well, these guys," Tamaki started, only to be cut off. "Are none of your concern," the cerulean-eyed shinobi stated. "Now get back to the construction site before I reduce your pay for skipping out on work or fire you from Namikaze Corp's employment, all of you." Naruto finished, turning his gaze to Yoshida and Minami, making sure that his threat was for them too. "You can't do that," Tamaki argued. "If you had read your contract, you would know that I can." Naruto said back, "If you do anything that shows Namikaze Corp in a bad light or are irresponsible, I'm in the right to dismiss you. If you don't believe me, you can check with Nagata, he has some contracts in case anyone else volunteers. Like I said, this is voluntary, I can't stop you from working, but that doesn't mean that I have to pay you if you prove to be a lousy employee," he concluded. Tamaki growled at Naruto, but his friends managed to convince him to leave, but not before he spit in Suzaku's direction. Naruto watched the 3 rebels leave before turning his attention to Suzaku and Yuffie, who had appeared while Naruto was dealing with Tamaki. "Are you two all right?" Naruto asked them politely. "We are fine, thank you," Yuffie replied with a bow. "And yourself?" "Oh, I'm Yuffie by the way, and this is Suzaku." I'm Naruto Uzumaki, it's nice to meet the both of you, and I'm fine. Naruto answered the pink-haired girl with a smile on his face. And this is Q. Naruto said, gesturing to the crimson-furred fox on his shoulder. Oh, she is simply adorable. Yuffie stated, lifting the small vixen off of Naruto's shoulder, with his permission. And proceeded to smother the kitsune against her chest. Oh my, Q thought over her and Naruto's mental link. This girl sure has a nice pair on her, not a bad size, and they seem so soft. She remarked. Naruto's eyes widened in surprise, though neither Suzaku nor Yuffie noticed his reaction. What the hell, Amami? Naruto shouted over their link, as a small blush bloomed across his face. What are you saying? Oh, relax, would you, it's just an observation. Q thought back amusedly, there's no need for you to be so embarrassed. The small one-tailed vixen stated. Whatever, Naruto grumbled. Or could it be that you're jealous of the fact that I get to feel them? Q said, and Naruto just knew that had she been in her human form, a huge fox-like grin would have been on her face similar to his own. Oh, of course not. Naruto replied, his blush only getting a bit darker. Oh, Q mused, what if it was Colin? She asked him, enjoying the way he immediately reacted to the name. As she watched his face burn red and his eyes widen further. You know, Colin's chest is actually a bit bigger than this girl's. Shut up. Naruto stuttered, completely flustered now, as an image of Colin came to mind in the outfit he had first seen her in. That outfit left little to the imagination while highlighting all her womanly curves at the same time. What is it about redheads that drives you Namikaze men crazy? Q wondered. I have no idea of what you're talking about. Naruto denied. Right, Q said disbelievingly. Well, I'm not okay. One of the Britannian students who had a bandana on his head said. Drawing Naruto out of his conversation with Amami, as he held up his busted camera. Why did you just let them go like that, Uzumaki, from the rumors going around at school? You should have been able to beat the crap out of those 11s. The other student demanded. What I want to know is what you two are doing here. Naruto said, more than asked, his flushed face back under control. As he fixed his gaze on the two of them. While the area isn't restricted, all civilians should have already been advised of the fact that reconstruction would be going on, so they show. Remain clear of the area unless absolutely necessary. That's none of your business, Uzumaki. The bandana-wearing student said. If your presence here causes trouble for Namikaze Corp, then it is my business. The shinobi pilot answered. Instead of answering him, the two students turned their ire to Suzaku. And why didn't you do anything? Damn it, some honorary citizen you are. The second student criticized. You should have killed them. The first student asserted, what are a few dead 11s to a guy like you? Who do you think is taking care of you all these years anyway? Slap. The silence that followed was because of Yuffie slapping the bandana-wearing boy across his cheek, shocking everyone into inaction. I'll not allow you to insult this man any longer, you oaf. She said angrily as she glared at the Britannian student. Why you? I think that you two should leave, now. Naruto intervened, as he glared at the two teens as well, unless you want to learn for yourselves either those rumors from school are true or not. He threatened, a minuscule amount of ki leaking out, but more than enough to scaring the two students shitless. Come on man, let's just get out of here. The second Britannian student said, with his friend quickly agreeing and leaving the area. Naruto, can I ask you something? Suzaku questioned curiously after a moment of silence. Sure. Naruto replied passively. You mentioned the Namikaze Corporation a couple of times. Can you really do all that stuff? I mean, you have to be someone really important if you can really do what you said. Suzaku stated at the end. I'm going to have to set up an interview or something eventually for this. Naruto mused to himself before focusing his attention on Suzaku. To answer your question, yes I can, though I want to avoid it if I can. I'm the head of the Namikaze Corporation, my full name is Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. Really, that's incredible, Yuffie said, surprised. Even back in the homeland, the developments and advancements that the Namikaze Corporation have managed to achieve in the last few years are talked about by nearly everyone. Well, it's not that big of a deal. Naruto replied sheepishly, scratching the back of his head. What are you doing here? The brown-haired Japanese pilot asked him. You mentioned reconstruction, but reconstruction of what? Can't you guess? The blonde shinobi asked. Before a wide grin spread across his face and he spread his arms out wide, the reconstruction of Shinjuku. You're going to rebuild, Shinjuku? Suzaku uttered in a shocked trance-like state. Yup, Naruto said cheerfully. But I don't plan making it an extension of the settlement, I plan on restoring Shinjuku to what it was before the war. Why? Why did this? The White Nightmare pilot asked. What reasons could you have for spending your time and resources for something no other Britannian cares about? Not that this is a bad thing or that I'm not happy that you're doing it, but I don't understand why. Do I need to have a reason? Naruto mused out loud to no one in particular, before shifting his attention out to the surrounding landscape. It was my godfather's wish to see the world at peace. He gave his life trying to achieve that dream. Now I've inherited his dream and this is my first step in making it a reality. Do you really think you can bring about peace? Suzaku asked. Naruto nodded once. Yes, but I know that I won't be able to do it by myself or anytime soon. I'm not that arrogant or stupid. For every person that agrees with my ideals there will be at least 10 that will oppose me. So what will you do? Yuffie asked. For peace to be possible the cycle of hatred must first be destroyed. I've already started. The Namikaze Corporation is a symbol of hope to the Japanese people that no matter how bad it is there is still the possibility that things will get better. Naruto began with a smile. I hope that by restoring Shinjuku and giving the people back their lives before the war that some of the hatred they bear will disappear, even if only a little. He continued before turning to his fellow nightmare pilot. In you Suzaku, do you think that peace is possible? I don't know. It seems like such a foreign concept to me sometimes. The green-eyed Japanese teen answered truthfully. When I was 10 the world seemed like a terribly sad place, a world without any sort of hope. I'm not sure if peace is possible, I don't even know what it is I would do in order to try and achieve it, but I do know that if I don't try and do something then others will lose more of the people they love, and I don't want anyone else to suffer like I have. Suzaku said, clenching his fists at the end. What you're trying to do is admirable, Naruto. But like you said, not everyone will agree with your methods, so I don't know if that is an actual answer. Not everyone will agree. Naruto admitted to himself already knowing that this was true. But that is why Kurama exists, to help convince people. I have a question for you Suzaku. Naruto said, changing the topic. What is it? Your name is Suzaku and your father's name is Genbu. The blonde shinobi pointed out. Getting a nod out of the honorary Britannian. What I want to know is, and I'm sorry if this is a sensitive subject, if your mother's name was Byako. Naruto asked him curiously. Suzaku nodded his head. As he smiled sheepishly, the question was one he got used to hearing when he was a kid. A lot of people thought it was either cute or funny about the theme that the Kururugi family had when it came to names. I don't understand, what does Suzaku's mother's name have to do with anything? Yuffie asked, confused, as her gaze shifted between the two teens. Suzaku, Genbu, Byako, and Seryu are the names of 4 guardians in Japanese mythology. Naruto explained, drawing look of understanding from the pink-haired blue-violet-eyed girl. The reason I asked was because I found it sort of interesting. And also kind of funny, to see if they were all named after one of the 4. Yeah, you and a bunch of other people, Suzaku murmured quietly to himself. Right. After Suzaku finished saying that, an explosion occurred nearby, drawing the 4's attention instantly to the column of smoke, followed by the 2 people who drove up in a large transport truck, one a blue-haired woman and the other a silver-haired bespectacled man. Naruto learned that the woman was called Cecile when Suzaku ran up to them before offering to help gather data for something called the Lancelot. While saying his goodbyes to him and Yuffie, Naruto didn't know what he was talking about until Suzaku came out of the back piloting the White Nightmare frame that the blonde shinobi had battled in Shinjuku a few days ago. So the pilot of the mysterious White Nightmare, the Lancelot, is Suzaku, huh? Naruto thought, watching the Lancelot blast off in the direction that the purebloods were fighting. This is very interesting, Zero, Suzaku, and I have similar goals, and yet in the grand scheme of things we might turn out being our greatest rivals. The former Jinchuriki realized. Naruto, I'm sorry. Yuffie spoke up, getting Naruto's attention and handing Q back to him, but I must do my part in order to stop this fighting. The pink-haired girl explained before giving him a SM. All bow and running off in the direction that the Lancelot had gone off in. So are we going as well? Q asked her former warden over their mental link. Of course, Naruto replied before taking off, easily outstripping Yuffie. And arriving at the arena to watch the show from the shadows. Everyone lower your weapons at once. In my name I command you. Yuffie ordered a few minutes later, a calm, ending tone in her voice completely different from the kind and caring girl from before. I am Euphemia Lee Britannia of the Empire and the third princess of the royal family. I am assuming command here, now fall back. Off to the side Naruto let out a whistle at Yuffie's true identity. Oh wow, the third princess, who would have thought? Naruto commented in slight awe. What surprised me was that you didn't jump in there the moment that the princess was in danger. Q said from her perch on the sapphire-eyed pilot's shoulder. There wouldn't have been a point. Naruto replied, evenly catching the look of sadness on Euphemia's face that everyone else seemed to miss when Suzaku kneeled in front of her. Suzaku had already moved in to protect her. Kurama showing up would serve no meaning. Bessie Day showing that he can't stay out of the spotlight. In fact, Kurama making an appearance could be perceived as a threat to Euphemia's safety. After all, a sword-wielding enigma that is known to have taken down Britannian military nightmare frames doesn't exactly inspire a sense of confidence and security with them. He reasoned. I suppose. Q relented. Let's go, things seem to be winding down here. The nightmare shinobi pilot decided before disappearing from the area. That night Euphemia Lee Britannia, sub-viceroy of Area 11, greeted her elder sister Cornelia Lee Britannia, second princess of the Holy Britannian Empire and viceroy of Area 11, Cornelia's first order the immediate capture of Zero. The next day at Ashford Academy, a new student stood at the front of the class introducing H. himself, although everyone recognized him at once, even if for two of them it was for completely different reasons. I'll be joining the student body here at Ashford Academy beginning today. My name is Suzaku Kururugi. It's a pleasure to meet you. Suzaku announced to the entire class. Well, isn't this a surprise? Naruto muttered with a small smile just loud enough for Colin to hear him, and even Shish. He had to strain her hearing in order to do that. She stared at him for a moment wondering what he meant, but when it became obvious that he wasn't about to elaborate, she turned her focus back to the front of the class. It was an hour later during one of the class's breaks that the students started to talk amongst themselves. After the incident with Naruto a couple of days back, they were more hesitant to make any sort of comment. But that hesitance had slowly faded away in the last hour. They tried to decide amongst themselves, wondering what Suzaku, an 11, was doing there, his involvement in Clovis murder, and the likelihood of him being a terrorist. The class's apprehension kept everyone from interacting with him. Even 3 members of the student council were hesitant from approaching, Rivals and Nina more so than Shirley. Ignoring the rest of the class, Naruto calmly walked up to Suzaku. Hey there, Suzaku, Naruto greeted the brown-haired boy with a smile. With wide eyes, the Japanese teen looked up at the person who had said his name, Naruto. Suzaku said, surprised to see the cerulean-eyed teen from the other day. What are you doing here? Same as you, Naruto replied with a shrug. I'm a student here. Though Suzaku was happy to see that he knew more than one person in the school, he couldn't help but flinch at what some of the other students were saying, and the things that they started to say about Naruto. Naruto, not that I'm not happy to see you, but do you really think it's a good idea to be talking to me? Suzaku asked him uneasily. He could feel the stares the other students in the classroom were giving the two. Naruto dismissed Suzaku's concern with a wave of his hand. From that one sentence, the blonde shinobi already figured that the green-eyed pilot was the type of person who would selflessly sacrifice himself for the good of others. It was something sort of noble and rather stupid at times. There's no need for that. I'm half Britannian and half Japanese. Suzaku, their opinion of me won't change just because I'm talking to you. Naruto reassured him. So how did you get into the academy? Yuffie arranged for a proper investigation to be held, and then she enrolled me in school, saying that a 17-year-old should be in school. Suzaku answered before catching something out the corner of his eye. Quickly standing up, excuse me Naruto, there is something I need to do right now, Suzaku said before leaving the classroom. Naruto knew why Suzaku had suddenly left. With his training he was always aware of his surroundings, so he had seen how Lelouch had made his way out of the room, stopping just long enough at the door to pull his collar before continuing. If Naruto's assumption was correct and the two teens really did know each other and it was most likely a secret signal between the two that they had come up with. "Hey Naruto," Rivals said as he walked up with the others, Colin having joined them. "How do you know the new guy?" he asked. "I met him yesterday near the construction site." Naruto answered him, offering the girls a smile that had them all blushing, one more than the other two. "So everything is okay with that, with the purebloods?" Shirley asked, referring to what Naruto had told them in the club room. "Yeah," the cerulean-eyed shinobi replied. After that incident with Zero, the purebloods lost a majority of the support that they had before. Plus they couldn't risk doing anything without everyone becoming suspicious that their opposition somehow involved orange. Naruto finished just a bit of distaste ring his voice at the reminder of how his favorite color was used. "What do you think about him, I mean the new transfer student? Do you think that he is dangerous?" Nina asked nervously, wanting to know Naruto's opinion. Naruto looked surprised for a second by the question before he thought about it. "Dangerous? No, not really, he seems like the type of guy who would put others ahead of himself and if it means that he will come out hurt in the end," the blonde shinobi said with his arms crossed over his chest before focusing his attention completely on glasses-wearing girl. "Don't let what her people say about him bother you, Nina. I know that it might be a bit scary for you, but Suzaku honestly seems like a good guy. I don't expect you to just open up to him, but at least get to know what kind of person he is before forming an opinion of him," Naruto stated, doing his best to reassure the shy black-haired girl. "I'll try, it's just that," Nina mumbled softly. "Like I said, don't push yourself, just give Suzaku a chance. Now," Naruto said before turning his attention back to everyone. "What did I miss yesterday?" the blonde former Jinchuriki asked with a wide grin on his face. A grin that Rivals returned. "Oh, nothing much," he began, just Colin punching Lelouch in the stomach. The blue-haired Britannian said, more amused that his best friend was punched by the frail-looking redhead than anything else. "Really?" Naruto asked, snickering, before shifting his attention the girl with ocean blue eyes who seemed to be embarrassed by the conversation due to the light blush that crossed her cheeks. "Wish I had been there to see it," the sky blue-eyed boy said with a laugh. "So was there a reason, or did you punch him just for the hell of it?" he questioned her. Well, Colin stammered nervously, silently cursing herself for her slip-up the other day. According to Shirley, it looked like Lelouch was trying to kiss her. Rivals commented, unperturbed about the scandalized shout from Shirley for revealing that she had seen what had happened when she had been walking by a nearby window. The cheerful and amused look that Naruto had suddenly disappeared, the grin left his face as he became serious. While he stared directly at Colin. "He didn't do anything to you, did he?" Naruto asked her sternly. Colin stared at the boy in slight shock, while the others fidgeted comfortably at the sudden turn of events, surprised by how serious he was acting all of a sudden. When Naruto had first entered the class and was then confronted by Alex Mercer on his first day, he had been calm and collected, amused, and maybe even a little indifferent with the situation, but now he appeared completely serious, maybe even a little protective, with a fierce determination in his eyes that managed to ensnare her in their gaze and took her breath away. "No, nothing." Colin found herself unconsciously answering Naruto's question, as she watched the blonde shinobi's cerulean blue eyes lightened up and gazed at her warmly, causing her to blush lightly. "That's good," Naruto replied with a smile, just as the warning bell went off to signal the break was coming to an end and everyone started to go back to their seats. Lelouch walking back into the class with Suzaku following a minute later and just before the next teacher walked in. For the rest of the day Colin would throw blonde curious glances, wondering why he suddenly seemed so protective of her. For the next couple of days Naruto had to watch as some of the Britannian students would do various things to harass Suzaku. He tried to get the brown-haired boy to stand up for himself, but each time the Japanese pilot would dismiss the actions against him, and both knew that reporting the abuse to the teachers wouldn't result in anything happening. Of course, just because Suzaku and the teachers wouldn't do anything didn't mean that Naruto was willing to sit back and let things happen. "The other students treat me of Suzaku reminded Naruto of some of the things that villagers would do to him back when he lived in Konoha, so he retaliated in the same manner that he did back then, by pranking them in some of the most embarrassing ways possible. Of course he made sure that Suzaku always had a solid alibi whenever something happened. The rest of the school avoided Suzaku as best they could, Nina herself Shiv. Ted from being outright afraid of the guy to just apprehensive. School was over for the day and all that was left was club activities that the students of Ashford Academy had to attend. Naruto and Len were walking toward the student council clubroom, with Q walking along beside them in order to stretch her legs for a bit. The two blue-eyed pilots were just making idle conversation about everyday things. Every few seconds Colin would throw Naruto a sidelong glance. While she was genuinely enjoying the blonde's company, she also wanted to know exactly how much he knew about her brother and his involvement with the resistance. But she knew that she couldn't ask until she was absolutely sure she could trust him and in a place where no one would overhear their conversation. Suddenly the PA system came on. "This is Millie Ashford, your student council president. Cat hunt everybody. There's a cat loose on campus that needs to be rounded up, so put everything on hold people. Participating clubs get budget priority and whoever catches our feline friend will get an extra special prize, a big old kiss from one of the members of the council," Millie declared, finishing with a maniac laugh. Members of Naruto began. "The council," Colin continued. "Like us." They finished at the same time before two different groups of both fanboys and fangirls popped out from behind some nearby bushes and trees. "Exactly." They all shouted as one. They started to talk about the implication of the president's words and what kind of kiss they would be getting, then came to the conclusion that they could get a kiss on the lips from either Naruto or Colin depending on who was asked, before they took off in search of the cat. "Hell no," Naruto shouted, causing Colin to jump slightly. "I barely saw Ved my first kiss last time. There is no way I'm going to allow it to get stolen now," he stated, looking down at the crimson-furred fox. "Q, run interference and distractions, make sure that no one catches that cat," the blonde shinobi ordered, though they both knew that if she wanted to, Amami would refuse and leave him to his fate. After a while Q nodded her head and ran off. Naruto let out a really even sigh, thankful that the Biju had actually listened to him instead of letting him suffer before leaving and beginning his own search for the cat. Colin was left on her own, mildly shocked that the small kitsune seemed to understand what Naruto was saying before she registered the fact that, one, she was by herself, and two, that there was literally now hundreds of guys after her first kiss. "There is no way that's how I'm going to get my first kiss," she said before running off, not caring at the moment about the fact that she was supposed to act sick and feeble. Q was having the most fun she has had in a long time that didn't involve her causing massive amounts of collateral damage to the surrounding area and villages. She had cast a low-level genjutsu to change her appearance to that of a simple cat before leading numerous Britannian students on a wild goose chase before jumping up high to someplace they couldn't reach, or casting another genjutsu to turn herself invisible, leaving them confused as they searched high and low for her. Right now she was outrunning the equestrian club as they chased after her on their horses, shocking them due to the fact that their fastest horses couldn't keep up with her. "How is that cat so damn fast?" one of the equestrian club members asked. "This is impossible. Did those science geeks experiment on it or something?" another member questioned. "That doesn't matter," a third member stated. "Just catch it so we can get our prize." "Ha, as if any of you children could even come close to catching me," Q thought smugly, a grin spreading across her fox face as she saw that she was approaching one of the school's water fountains. "Now follow me a bit longer, little children." Q slowed down, giving the equestrian club the false belief that they were catching up because she was getting tired, causing them to erupt in a cheer before she disappeared. "What the hell? Where did it go? I'm telling you, those damn science geeks did something to it. I don't care, just find it now." Casting another genjutsu, Q had the horses see a large snake appear out of thin air, scaring them and forcing them on their hind legs, causing them to drop their riders into the water before they ran away. The club members were left spluttering out water, confused, and their clothes completely soaked through as they watched their horses run off without a hint of slowing down anytime soon. Moments later the equestrian club came to a sudden realization. Not only had they lost the cat, but now they would also have to chase after their own horses. Q, seeing her job done, snickered as she snuck off to search for any other students that she could play with, i.e. Torment. Really all the annoying things I do for that boy. Q thought before spotting more prey, students heading her way. Let the next round begin. Naruto was searching high and low for the cat just as Millie got done announcing that she wanted whatever it was holding brought back to her. Whatever that cat's holding better be worth it. Naruto muttered to himself. For a moment he considered creating an army of shadow clones to search for the cat, but in the end decided not to. Since that was overkill and settled for just creating 2. It was only after Naruto created his 2 shadow clones and began his search again that he realized something. It's been 3 years, I'm the owner of a billion-dollar company. Probably the strongest person on this planet aside from a mommy, and I'm still being made to chase after a damn cat like a fresh out of the academy genin. Naruto outed in his mind before spotting the purple-furred cat with a limp walking toward what he knew was a dead end. This better be worth it. The cerulean-eyed pilot thought once more. Turning the corner, Naruto saw that the cat was indeed trapped, but was shocked when he saw what was on top of its head. Is that Zero's mask? Naruto wondered, recognizing the mask that the cat had on from when he met T. He masked individual and the many posters located throughout the school. I guess if I had anything doubts about Lelouch being Zero I can forget them now. Taking a deliberate step forward in order no. To frighten the masked cat, Naruto felt a chill run down his spine before he could even get close. Turning his head to the right slowly, almost fearfully, with wide eyes, Naruto saw a group of girls with a predatory look in their eyes. Though they were all wearing their academy-designated uniform, they were also decked out in the traditional fangirl ensemble of t-shirts, headbands, and the flags and banners that all proclaimed their love for the blonde singer. Oh, hey girls, Naruto greeted the group of at least a dozen girls nervously and with a wave of his hand. I suppose you're here after the cat. No, one of the girls declared. Naruto couldn't tell which one. Why should one of us settle for a single kiss, when we could all get as many as we want if we catch you and more, another girl said. So while the rest of the school is busy with a cat hunt, we are on a fox hunt. She finished. Naruto took a single step away from the group, while at the same time they all took a single step forward as one. Naruto took another couple of steps back only for actions to be mirrored perfectly by his fangirls taking the exact number of steps forward exactly when he stepped back. Not NTING to wait for the girls to decide to rush him. Naruto turned around and made a mad dash away from his fans, the girls following immediately afterwards, not even sparing a glance to the cat wearing Zero's mask. The cat walked out of the dead end behind the girls, stopping just long enough to scratch at the mask on its head in an attempt to take it off before running off. Colin, while searching, had bumped into Shirley. The 2 female students quickly agreed to work together to catch the cat when they realized that they were both worried about being forced to kiss someone. After a couple of minutes they had managed to corner the cat under a table by a staircase. Though neither managed to get a good look at it, both of them had a determined glint in their eyes. Okay, we do this right and our lips will be safe. Colin said before looking over to Shirley, who was standing beside her. Shirley, you cover the rear. The redhead half-Britannian told her fellow council member before she moved forward towards the cat. Wait a sec. Shirley spoke up. Colin stopped as she glanced back at Shirley. What's the matter? She asked her. Shirley grew noticeably more nervous. Who would you want to get a kiss from? Is there anyone in particular? The orange-haired girl asked Colin tentatively. Unbridled, an image of Naruto appeared in Colin's mind, causing her to blush. The blush only got worse when she remembered how Naruto looked when he got out of the shower. At the same time, an image of Kurama also appeared in Colin's mind. It wouldn't be Lulu, would it? Shirley questioned, seeing the blush that had spread across Colin's face, and had come to her own conclusion. Just what would make you think that? Colin demanded incredulously. If that was what I wanted, I wouldn't have punched him a few days ago. She pointed out, causing Shirley to stammer embarrassedly as she recalled the event. While the 2 girls were having their little argument, they never noticed the purple-furred cat walk calmly away behind them. When they finally did notice, they once again began to look around frantically. The first shadow clone spent the first few minutes searching the school grounds before realizing that there was too much area to cover, even with 3 of the same person looking for the cat. Stopping in its search, it thought for a moment, trying to figure out something that would make it easier to draw the cat out and make it come to him. It only took a second longer for the shadow clone to come up with an idea that could work, making its way towards the kitchen. The Naruto shadow clone used its shinobi training to sneak into the kitchen. Being careful to make sure that none of the cooks and other workers saw it, the shadow clone snuck out all the fish it could find before laying it out in the open. The shadow clone figured that if the cat was at all hungry, then it would make its way towards it in search of the food. Maybe this wasn't such a good idea, the shadow clone thought. To itself, watching as many different types of cats came out of nowhere, and some birds flew down as well, and started to eat the fish that was laid out, but sadly none of the cats were the one that Naruto, and the rest of the school, was looking for. Well, I'm definitely not going to clean this up, the shadow clone thought, seeing the mess that was left over from the fish that was left uneaten, before it dispelled itself in a poof of smoke. Later the groundskeepers would wonder who was responsible for all the fish remains that was left on the ground, and cursing that person for forcing them to clean up the fish and what the cats and birds had left behind. The second Naruto shadow clone was in the Ashford cafeteria, gorging itself on all the ramen it could eat. Hey kid, aren't you participating in this cat hunt the council president has set up? One of the cafeteria workers asked the clone. No, the shadow clone replied cheerfully, as it finished its 20th bowl of ramen. I'm just here to eat ramen. So keep them coming. Are you sure you can pay for all of this? The worker asked doubtfully as another bowl was brought to the blonde-haired teen. Don't worry, money isn't a problem, the clone said dismissively, digging into his new bowl of ramen. If you say so, the worker said with a shrug of his shoulders, not really caring as long as he can get paid. A sudden commotion from the kitchen drew the two individuals' attention. What's going on back there? The worker asked. All of the fish are gone, one of the man's co-workers shouted. What? We just bought a whole bunch, he shouted as he made his way back into the kitchen, leaving the Naruto shadow clone to enjoy his half-finished bowl of ramen. Naruto eventually got away from his fangirls, regrouped with Q, and saw the masked cat enter a building through an open window. Naruto ran towards the entrance, but stopped when both Lelouch and Suzaku appeared at the same time. Though they were all surprised that they had each appeared, it was Lelouch and Suzaku that were the most surprised by Naruto's appearance. Naruto! They both shouted with wide eyes as they took in the state of the blonde's clothes, as Lelouch gasped out for air, trying to catch his breath. What happened to you? Suzaku asked him, shocked. Naruto's appearance was in a state of disarray. His blazer had some tears in it, and his white collared shirt were hanging loosely on his body. His spiky blonde hair was unnaturally messy as it jutted out at strange angles that were different from how it normally looked. He also had some scratches on his face, along with a bit of dirt that gave him a haggard appearance. My fangirls decided to use this opportunity to try and have their way with me. I barely escaped, Naruto explained, brushing away a bead of sweat. He might be a shinobi, but all type of power was basically useless when facing a horde of hormonal fangirls. One of Suzaku's eyebrows rose in question. Fangirls? Brown-haired Japanese pilot said confusedly. That's right, I didn't tell you this. Naruto began. I'm not only the owner of the Namikaze Corporation, and I'm also the lead singer of Spiraling Leaf, he clarified. Is that so? Suzaku mused. Not that it is any of my business, but wouldn't having a whole bunch of girls after you be a good thing? The green-eyed honorary Britannian asked him. Yeah, I have a few around the school and they don't seem so bad. Lelouch added in skeptically. You have admirers, Lelouch, there is a difference. Naruto replied, shaking his head, and you're right, having a whole bunch of girls after you isn't all that bad, but don't let the name fool you. Fangirls are anything but normal girls. They are more like demons in human flesh masquerading as girls, and the occasional boy. The blonde shinobi said with a shudder, and for some strange reason both Lelouch and Suzaku shuddered as well. The sudden meowing of the cat drew the three boys' attention up towards the roof. The cat's up there. Let's go, Naruto stated, starting up the stairs with Suzaku behind him, followed by Lelouch. Suzaku, Naruto, wait, don't go up there, Lelouch shouted out after the two. But the student council president said to catch it. Suzaku replied. And I want to get this over with, before someone else catches it. Naruto commented. Don't worry about it, I'll get the cat, Lelouch offered, frantically trying to keep up with the other two teens. I was always more agile than you, Remember when that little bird got loose? Suzaku reminded his friend in a teasing tone. Quite talking ancient history. The black-haired Britannian youth retorted. The cerulean-eyed ninja glanced back at the vice president of the student council from over his shoulder. Ancient history. Naruto guffawed. Just the other day you were struggling to keep Colin up. Not to mention she knocked the air out of you with a single punch. Suzaku chuckled at his friend's plight. I see that you re as good with women now as you were 7 years ago, Lelouch. Shut up. Lelouch snapped at his childhood friend lightly. For a girl, who is supposed to be ill and feeble, Colin punches hard, makes me scared to think of what she could do if she wasn't sick. I was sure that she cracked a rib or two. Excuses, Naruto replied, continuing his ascent up the stairs, as both he and Suzaku left Lelouch behind. They're both exercise nuts, Lelouch muttered to himself, as he watched both of them follow a cat out a window. Once outside, all small group of students, along with the remaining student council members and Nunnally, gathered to watch the three teens that were still chasing after the cat on top of the roof of a bell tower. One was at the open window and the other two were mocking their way towards the top where the cat, its head hidden by the bell. One of the teens had a small crimson object hanging around his shoulder. They were each easily identified as Lelouch, Suzaku, and Naruto. The blonde shinobi was having an easier time walking up towards the cat by applying chakra to his feet as opposed to Suzaku, who was forced to crawl on his stomach. How are you doing that? Suzaku asked, amazed. Trade secret, Naruto replied with a large grin. Lelouch watched as his two fellow academy students draw closer to their target. I guess I can understand Naruto's reasons for wanting to catch the cat. But what about Suzaku? He never went along with the crowd like this, he thought, before letting out a yell as he slipped when he tried to follow after the two. Alerted by the sound, and by the many gasps from the students down below, Naruto and Suzaku looked back to see Lelouch slowly sliding over the edge of the rooftop as he desperately tried to get a hold on the roof to stop his descent. Lelouch! Suzaku shouted out loud in worry for his friend, as he moved to save Lelouch from falling. Damn it, Naruto cursed. You deal with the cat, he instructed, cutting the flow of chakra into his feet, so he began sliding down the roof alongside Suzaku, as he threw an arm back in the direction of the masked cat, allowing Q to run on top of it and reach the cat. Lay low. UCH did his best not to panic as he slowly fell off the roof of the bell tower until he felt each of his hands being grabbed by someone, much to the relieved sighs of those below them who were too focused on Lelouch's well-being to take notice of anything else. Looking up, he noticed that both Naruto and Suzaku had one of his hands in theirs, but it was what he saw past them that instantly drew all of his attention. Next to the bell, the cat had managed to get its head out from under it without knocking the mask off, with Q standing next to it. For a second, Lelouch was scared that the crimson-furred fox somehow recognized the mask until he saw her hit the mask with her paw, causing it to fall off the cat's head and roll down the roof until it got stuck, letting out a relieved sigh. Lelouch felt himself being pulled up from the edge of the roof where he was dangling by Suzaku and Naruto. Retrieving Q, the ancient kitsune confirmed that it was indeed Zero's mask and that she had knocked off the cat so no one else discovered that truth. Naruto walked out towards the building's entrance, Suzaku having gone ahead with the cat and Lelouch staying back for some reason that only Naruto and Q knew about. When Naruto came out of the entrance, it was to a tense standoff between Suzaku and the rest of the students. He took a quick look around to get a feel of the situation and noticed that the feelings in the air by those present were mostly ones of uncertainty, as no one knew how to react to the situation, and as a result were too afraid to do anything. Walking forward, Naruto patted Suzaku on the back, a bit roughly, as it caused the Japanese student to stumble forward. Good job up there, Suzaku, Naruto told the boy with a fox-like grin, breaking the tense silence that had appeared. Huh? Suzaku uttered, looking back at Naruto confusedly. Shirley was the first one to react as she rushed forward toward the blonde and brown-haired teens. You saved him, thank you so much. Yellow-green-eyed girl said thankfully. Rivals quickly followed Shirley's lead. Yeah, way to go there, Naruto, new guy, the blue-haired Britannian student added. Millie came forward next, only one thing on her mind. That cat was carrying something, wasn't it? Millie said. Yeah, there was something on its head, but I never got a good look at it. Suzaku answered apologetically. I didn't either. Naruto lied when Millie, rivals, and Shirley's attention turned to him in silent question. Whatever that cat had on must be the embarrassing secret that Lelouch is hiding. Millie insisted excitedly. So that's it, Madam President. Lelouch's voice came from behind Naruto and Suzaku, as he stepped out of the shadows of the building looking as calm as ever, something that both Millie and Shirley seemed to be depressed about. So, do you two know each other? Colin asked the question that everyone there was wondering. Suzaku tried to deny the accusation, but wasn't given the chance to. He's my friend, Lelouch stated clearly so that everyone could hear him. Madam President, would you permit him as a member of the student council? The black-haired Britannian requested, shocking 3 of his longest friends. The rules are clear, all students are required to join a club, he said. Millie looked thoughtful for a second before a smile graced her face. Well, you are the vice president, I suppose I can't refuse, she said happily. Everyone was more relaxed after Millie's declaration. Nunnally kissed both Suzaku and Lelouch on the cheek, surprising both boys when she mentioned that it was the reward that Millie had promised for catching the cat. When Nunnally offered Naruto the same reward for his part, he insisted that she give it to Q since she was the one that technically caught the purple-furred cat. But he couldn't come up with an excuse when she said it was a thank you for helping save her brother. Alright then, let's celebrate the catching of the cat. Rivals cheered. Everything is on the new guy naturally. Or even a rich friend here, the light gray-eyed Britannian student said, slinging his arm over Naruto's shoulder, disturbing Q from her perch on the blonde shinobi's shoulder, causing her to growl lightly at the blue-haired male and making him remove his arm and smile sheepishly. Sure thing, Naruto answered jokingly, laughing at his reaction to Q. Oh, back off, Shirley scolded the blue-haired boy, making his smile all that much wider, before introducing herself to Suzaku. Hi there, I'm Shirley, pleasure to meet Cha. Oh right, I'm Rivals. Rivals said with a hand behind his head. Millie Ashford, student council president. Millie continued. Nina looked at the scene apprehensively before her eyes settled on Naruto specifically, as he watched the proceedings approvingly. She remembered everything he has said so far in concern to her fear of 11s and what he had said to her the day that Suzaku had joined the academy, about how she shouldn't judge the boy until she got to know the type of person he was. So far, from what she had seen, Naruto had been right and Suzaku seemed like a good person. With that in mind, she continued the introductions. I'm Nina, the black-haired girl said shyly, shocking her friends slightly that she spoke up at all, but unlike her friends and fellow council members, she didn't approach the brown-haired Japanese. She could be civil with Suzaku, but that didn't help when it came to her fears. Suzaku stared at everyone, a smile appearing on his face. The pleasure is mine, he finally said. For the next half hour, members of the student council showed Suzaku around the clubhouse and informed him of some of the things he would need to do as a member. Not too long after, Naruto had to excuse himself when he got a call from the receptionist at Namikaze Corporation informing him about a meeting that had been arranged at the last minute, and one he had to attend. Naruto abruptly leaving made the others question, and who set up the meeting with their fellow council member that required his immediate attention. The blonde's refusal to answer left them all curious. An hour later, Naruto sat at his desk in an actual suit instead of the clothes he regularly wore, finishing up some paperwork while he waited for person who set up the meeting to arrive. Amami was up in the apartment waiting, both agreeing that it would be best for Naruto not to have Q there when the guest arrived, but with their mental link open so she could hear everything that was said. Naruto had just finished signing a paper when there was a knock on the door to his office. Come in, Naruto instructed, setting his pen down. The door opened and a black-haired woman stepped to the side, bowing as she let the people she was escorting into the room before closing the door behind them. The first two to enter were both male and were dressed in a similar to one another. They wore a dark red coat that was closed with a gold pattern at the front, black shoulder pads, gold cuffs around their wrists, and blue cloth that acted as belts around their waists, black military combat boots and white pants that were tucked into the boots, and white gloves. Though they were dressed similarly, their physical appearance was vastly different from one another. One had long black hair that was pulled into a ponytail and wore glasses over his light blue eyes. He was tall with a slender frame. If Naruto had to use a word to describe the man, it would probably be elegant, or at least something similar. The second man by contrast had short-cut light brown hair that was brushed back, black-colored eyes and a diagonal scar going across his face, thick eyebrows, not as thick as Lee or Guy-sensei's though, that gave him a rough appearance because of his more defined facial structure. He stood about the same height as his companion but with a more muscular frame. Once they entered the room they moved to stand apart, putting some space between them, and making room for the third person to easily stride toward Naruto, while they stayed behind closer to the door, standing almost at attention. The third person strode forward and stood confidently in front of Naruto. She had dark pink hair that came down to a little past her shoulders, indigo-colored eyes, and easily very beautiful. It was Cornelia Lee Britannia, the new viceroy of Area 11. She was dressed in clothes similar to her two subordinates except that her clothes accented her womanly curves. Her boots were white, and over it she wore a white cape that separated into segments at the bottom and top. "Please have a seat, Viceroy," Naruto said, gesturing to one of the seats in front of her desk. The second princess of Britannia took the offered seat without saying a word, as she took in tea. The appearance of the person across from her. He was younger than what she had expected, even younger than her sister Euphemia, and she wasn't sure if the whisker marks on his cheeks were some type of tattoos or birthmarks. But it wasn't the whisker marks that drew the majority of her attention. It was the look in his eyes and the air around him. She had dealt with many politicians and businessmen in the past, and they were all the same in her opinion. They were greedy, lazy, and self-centered. When they looked at her it was with lustful, calculating eyes, or ones filled with fear and nervousness, thinking what she could do for her to them, but the teen in front of her was noticeably different. There was no fear, greed, or lust in his eyes, something that surprised her considering he should be a hormone-driven teen. Either that or she was losing her physical appeal, something she personally didn't want to consider as a woman. Instead his gaze spoke of confidence, a respect she couldn't quite identify, and how he viewed them as equals. For that last part Cornelia wasn't sure if she should feel impressed or insulted. To be viewed as an equal by a half-Britannian that was younger than her wasn't something she ever thought she would witness. "You obviously know who I am, and these are two of my personal knights, Guilford and Darlton," the second princess said, gesturing to the two behind her, who nodded their heads once at Naruto at the mention of their names. "Now how about you introduce yourself?" The tone in Cornelia's voice made it obvious that it was a demand and not a request. "Of course," Naruto replied placidly. "I am Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, owner of this company. What can I do for you, princess?" The shinobi asked calmly, keeping his gaze focused on the woman across from him, but making sure that he could also see the two that came with her in his line of sight. "You can start by telling me what you are trying to achieve by helping the 11s rebuild the Shinjuku ghetto," Cornelia commanded firmly, not bothering with beating around the bush. Naruto was taken back slightly by the inquiry but didn't let the surprise show through his calm facade, as he answered as bees. He could his typical response probably wouldn't be acceptable in this situation. "First off, I'd like to begin by saying that I in no way mean to offend or disrespect you or the Britannian Empire, Viceroy Cornelia," Naruto began. "Very well," Cornelia replied evenly, her eyes hardening, looking for any signs that might hint his involvement with forces working against the Empire, namely Zero. "I do not agree with the methods Britannia uses to establish their rule over the areas," Naruto stated simply, knowing that with a person like Cornelia it was less likely she would be angry if he came out and said it instead of dragging it out. "Or more precisely, I do not agree with the conditions you leave the people you defeat. The reason I wish to rebuild Shinjuku is to give them some semblance of the life they've lost. So you're doing this because you pity them or feel some sort of guilt?" the Viceroy asserted. Just because she's allowing the teen to say his piece doesn't mean she wants to hear it. "No," Naruto denied. "I do not believe in giving or receiving pity, and I have nothing to feel guilty about. I simply want to give them back their homes and their lives. By doing this I also believe that I am helping the Empire." This statement made Cornelia curious. "How so?" she asked with an elegant eyebrow raised in question. Naruto took a pose similar to the one he remembered Tsunade used to take when she sat behind her desk. After the war the Japanese are left with nothing, so they grew to hate and resent Britannians, blaming their suffering on them. By giving them back what they've lost they no longer have a reason to hate Britannia and oppose it. After all, if they're happy, what possible reason would they have to fight? and with that there would that many people less willing to support Zero in his endeavors. Naruto reasoned. Of course there will still be those who will fight, but nowhere near as many. Cornelia thought over what the half-blood Britannian said and could see the sense behind his reasoning. People need a reason to fight, no matter what that reason might be, but once they lose that reason they become complacent and submissive. She also agreed with leaving Zero without any type of support. There had already been numerous uprisings by the 11s in response to Zero's appearance, which brought up the question. What is your opinion of Zero and Kurama? He asked him as she gestured to her right where the TV screen was paused on an image of Zero and Kurama. Careful Naruto, Amami warned over their mental link. A woman like Cornelia has a lot experience dealing with people. If you outright lie to her she will know and you obviously can't tell her the truth. I know. Naruto replied, I'll just have to be as honest as possible without revealing anything. He decided. They're dangerous. The blonde shinobi stated in an even tone while staring straight at Cornelia. Zero for obvious reasons and the possibility that he could have some sort of contacts within the military if the incident with Jeremiah is anything to go by. Not to mention that there is the chance of 11s rallying behind him. But personally I think that Kurama might be the most dangerous one of the two. Naruto stated. Someone is a little full of themselves. Amami remarked. Shut up. Naruto replied dryly. And how exactly have you come to that conclusion? Cornelia inquired forcefully. The idea that the person responsible for her half-brother's death was being considered a lesser threat did not sit well with her. While Zero is an obvious threat we at least know where he stands. The blonde shinobi said. Kurama on the other hand is a mystery we know, according to him, that he will fight to protect but what we don't know by what means. We also don't know if anyone is helping him. If he will try to recruit 11s like Zero most likely will, or how he managed that speed and the destruction of the Sutherlands. It could be a specialized suit with advanced technology that gives him his abilities. Naruto supplied. The second princess' eyes narrowed, technology that the Namikaze Corporation can provide. Cornelia questioned in an accusing tone. No, Naruto. Rebuffed immediately with a shake of his head. Namikaze Corp. Does not research or develop technology for the use of warfare. A careful account is kept of what every employee is researching ensuring. That they aren't developing something they shouldn't. The Crimson Knightmare pilot explained. Cornelia nodded her head, though she accepted the teen's explanation that didn't necessarily mean that she believed it. It wouldn't be the first time that an employee embezzled company resources for their own purposes after all, but that was a different matter for another time. Very well. Now I'm sure that you are curious about my reasons for setting up this meeting, Mr. Namikaze, especially on such short notice. Cornelia began, getting a nod from Naruto. Sub-Viceroy Euphemia has expressed her desire to help and support the Namikaze Corporation in their reconstruction of the Shinjuku ghetto. As such I wanted to see for myself what kind of person was leading this project. I want to make it perfectly clear right now that as long as your plans do not prove to be a danger to the settlement, or Britannia as a whole, and as long as the sub-viceroy gives you her support then you should have no problems with any government official unless it's by my or Princess Euphemia's orders. The dark pink-haired Princess Viceroy told him, as she stood up and saw herself out Guilford opening the door for her. I understand. Thank you for informing me, Viceroy Cornelia. Naruto said, standing up at his desk and giving the princess a slight bow before straightening himself out. Oh, by the way, Mr. Namikaze. Cornelia began, stopping just at the entrance of the door and looking over her shoulder at the blonde teen. In a few days the Namikaze Corporation will be given the opportunity to help rebuild another of the ghettos. She said mysteriously, confusing Naruto, before leaving Guilford and Darlton following dutifully behind her, and closing the door as they left. What was that about? Naruto thought to himself as he replayed Cornelia's departing words to him in his mind. I can't be sure. Amami replied, but if she was saying the truth then we will find out soon enough. She finished. I guess you're right. Naruto finished, letting out a sigh at the end. For some reason he was sure that when he found out what Cornelia meant it wouldn't be anything good. The next day all the students were once again gathered in the auditorium for Prince Clovis' funeral, but this time attendance was mandatory for all students so Naruto had no other choice but to be there. All the students stood perfect. Lee in line as they looked towards the giant screen that was displayed at the front of the room. Naruto stood between Lelouch and Suzaku near the front of the auditorium, with Q on his shoulder, watch. Hing as the screen showed everyone that was in attendance for the third Prince of Britannia's funeral in the capital city of Pendragon before settling on a giant picture of Clovis holding a rose with a podium in front of it. Walking up to the podium was a man in his 60s with hair that had grown white with time and been curled. In front of everyone stood the 98th Emperor of the Holy Britannia Empire, Charles Z. Britannia. All men are not created equal. The Emperor began his speech. Naruto did his best to hide the scowl that wanted to appear on his face from the Emperor's words. Amami on his shoulder could sense the negative emotions that her former holder was hiding along with the ones coming from Lelouch. There was even some distaste coming from Suzaku. Some are born swifter afoot, some with greater beauty. Some are born into poverty and others born sick and feeble. Both in birth and upbringing, in sheer scope of ability every human is inherently different. The Emperor continued. Just because people are born into a certain life doesn't mean that life can't eventually be changed, either by their own actions or the actions of others. Naruto thought, or that a person can eventually surpass their limitations with enough hard work and dedication. Yes, that is why people discriminate against one another, which is why there is struggle, competition and the unfaltering march of progress. But progress that depends on such things will eventually lead up to absolute ruin. The blonde shinobi retorted mentally. Inequality is not wrong, equality is. What right do you have to say that having so much while others have so little? What of the EU which made equality a right? Rabble politics by a popularity contest. The Chinese Federation with its equal distribution of wealth. A nation of lazy dullards. The Namikaze Corporation, for all its accomplishments, is rumored to be run by a naive child who believes in helping everyone and treating them with respect and equality. Despite the obvious differences in class, breeding, and abilities. Bastard, Naruto thought, a glare appearing on his face for only a moment, as he heard some faint whispering from the nearby students. But not our beloved Britannia. We fight, we compete, evolution is continuous. Britannia alone moves forward, advancing steadily into the future. And as a result other nations are forced back into the darkness. Even the death of my son, Clovis, demonstrates Britannia's unswerving commitment to progress. We will fight on, we shall struggle, compete, plunder and dominate, and in the end, the future shall be ours. What of those that do not agree with Britannia? Will you destroy them and leave them in ruin for the sake of your progress? Naruto questioned, his face as impassive as before. All hail Britannia. Naruto closed his eyes. Britannia needs to change or face their inevitable destruction. The cerulean-eyed blonde shinobi thought, as he listened to various shouts of the people who attended Clovis' funeral repeating their emperor's words. Following the end of Prince Clovis' funeral, the members of the student council all returned to the club room. Naruto, with Q lying across his shoulders, pulled out his laptop and cell phone, as he sat at the table located in the student council's clubroom and started relaying instructions to some of his workers. After the Emperor's not-so-subtle comment about the Namikaze Corporation, or more specifically his comment against him, Naruto was sure that there would be a backlash and the blonde shinobi wanted to be prepared for it. How big or small of an impact that backlash would make was still to be determined. Hey Naruto, what are you doing? Rivals asked the blonde shinobi. Looking up from his laptop, Naruto noticed that everyone's focus was on him. Letting out a sigh, Naruto answered. Running damage control, he replied. The blue-haired student rose one of his eyebrows. Damage control? Rivals said, confused. Because of what the Emperor said? Millie questioned, having an idea of what the cerulean-eyed student was saying, and getting a nod from Naruto in response. Shirley looked between the two blondes, confused. I don't get it. What does what the Emperor said have to do with anything? The orange-haired girl asked. Naruto tapped one of his fingers on the table he was sitting at, taking a quick glance at his laptop and the information on it. Then answered Shirley's question. Companies, like the Namikaze Corporation, for the most part rely greatly on the public's opinion of them. Things like bad publicity or faulty merchandise will cause the public's faith and loyalty to the company to fall, which in turn will cause them to want to buy less of our merchandise, and the Namikaze Corp ends up losing revenue. Naruto explained. Because the Emperor called me a naive child, there will be many who will doubt my ability to run the Namikaze Corporation effectively. In fact, I know quite a few people who would like nothing more than use this as an opportunity to take it from me. And since a majority of the population will listen to him just because of who he is, I have to come up with plans to make sure I don't lose clientele. Or at least as few clients as possible. He finished, typing a few things on his laptop. You don't think it will be that bad, do you? Shirley asked him, concerned for our friend and fellow student council member. Hopefully it won't be, Naruto replied, but I still should get things ready just in case it is. Taking a seat at the table, Lelouch looked at Naruto curiously. What do you have planned? The violet-eyed boy questioned. Naruto spared the raven-haired boy a glance out of the corner of his eye before he shrugged his shoulders nonchalantly. Probably some promotions. Sell some merchandise at reduced prices, sponsor some events. Here Naruto shrugged his shoulders again. I might give out some of the Namikaze Corporation's latest products out as prizes. He finished. I have the perfect idea. Millie declared cheerfully, clapping her hands together, drawing everyone's attention to her. We should hold a ball here at the school. Everyone stared at the blonde girl, confused until rivals asked the question they all wanted to ask. What are you talking about, Madam President? Millie let out a huff, annoyed that no one else seemed to understand her brilliant plan. As she crossed her arms under her impressive chest. Isn't it obvious? The blonde council president asked incredulously. If we hold a ball and the Namikaze Corporation gives out some of its products as prizes, like Naruto said, then it would be all the students will be able to talk about, making everyone forget about what happened today, or at the very least give them something else to talk about. It would be even better if word of this gets out to the parents of some of the more prominent students. Plus those very same students might someday take over for their parents, and you will want them to have a good opinion of your company. Millie finished, looking straight at Naruto. Naruto looked at his fellow blonde for a moment before chuckling. That plan is so devious, I like it. He said to her with a grin. Thank you, it's a gift really. Millie replied in a faux humble voice. But aren't we already planning on having a party to welcome Q and Arthur as mascots into the student council? Nina asked softly. Arthur being the cat the entire school was chasing the other day, while Q's fur bristled at being referred to as a mascot, though no one noticed. Is there even enough money in the budget for a ball? She questioned curiously. The party is for the members of the student council and the ball will be for the entire school. And with everyone having to deal with Prince Clovis' murder, alongside with everyone worrying on about who Zero and Kurama really are, the school could use something to cheer everyone up. Millie said, waving Nina's first concern off. As to the budget, she trailed off at the end as she stared at Naruto questioningly, since he was the one who knew it best. There isn't enough money left over for anything extravagant, Naruto told shaking his head with a frown, causing Millie to deflate a little at the news. Luckily I heard this really reliable rumor that said that the Namikaze Corp was looking to sponsor some events. The higher-eyed shinobi finished with his usual fox-like grin. Alright, then that settles it, we're holding a ball, Millie said happily. Wait, just like that? Shirley asked in disbelief. Don't the rest of us at least get a say in this? Millie gave Shirley a sly look accompanied by a smile. Oh, you have some complaints. I'd thought you'd be all for it, considering you could ask a certain someone to go with you, she said teasingly, and causing a light blush to appear on Shirley's face. Madam President, the orange-haired girl yelled embarrassedly. But I guess if that is how you feel, we could put it to a vote, Millie said nonchalantly. So all those in favor? She asked the rest of the council. You already know I'm in, Naruto told her with a grin. I guess if there really is no problem with it, then I'm okay with it, Shirley said bashfully, a small blush still on her cheeks as she looked off to the side, and away from where Lelouch was standing. It does sound interesting, Nina spoke up quietly. You know I'm always with you, Madam President, Rivals added, giving Millie a thumbs up. I'll even help supply the drinks. It better not be anything alcoholic, Rivals, Shirley said, reproach FULLY, recalling the incident with the champagne bottle from the other day. Like we could stop you from getting your way even if we tried, Lelouch remarked jokingly, Millie sticking out her tongue at him in response. Well, I've never been to a ball, but it sounds like fun, so sure, Suzaku said hesitantly and with an unsure smile. Sounds great, Colin said when everyone turned to her for her answer. Really, she couldn't care less about the dead third prince, and she certainly wasn't the type of girl to enjoy going to balls, seeing them mostly as annoying and pointless. Sure, given the right situation and the right partner, she thought, taking a subconscious glance towards a certain blue-eyed teen, Colin was sure that she could enjoy herself. But in the end she had no real reason to oppose He ball, and she would most likely be expected to agree anyway. Good, then we can start planning now. If all goes well we can probably hold it in a few weeks, Millie stated, plans already forming inside of her head. Maybe we might even be able to get Spiraling Leaf to play at the ball. She added, looking at the band's lead singer expectantly. Sorry, but the band's got a concert soon, so we will be too busy getting everything ready to also worry about playing at a ball. Naruto said apologetically. That's too bad, I'll just have to think of something else then. The blonde student council president said, as she went back to planning things out. There she goes again, Rivals said with a chuckle at seeing the glint that appeared in the blonde president's eye, before turning his attention to the other blonde in the room. You know, with all this talk about the Namikaze Corp, it has made me curious about something. The blue-haired academy student stated. Oh, and what is that? Naruto asked with a raised eyebrow. What the inside of such a place looks like. Rival replied. I mean, it would be awesome to take a tour of the place that is responsible for the most advanced innovations in the last few years. A tour? Naruto repeated, stupefied and surprised by the question. It wasn't every day that someone asked to take a tour of his company. In fact, this would be first time anyone has ever asked that. Actually, that sounds like an interesting idea, Rivals. I'd like to take a tour of the Namikaze Corporation as well. Lelouch said, as he started forming plans that he could use in the future. I'd love to go on a tour of the Namikaze Corp, as well. Nina said, a bit of excitement evident in her voice, as she imagined taking a tour of such a remarkable place. The other members of the student council showing some amount of interest in the idea as well. Well, I never really thought about giving a tour of the place, to be honest. Naruto admitted truthfully, as he scratched his cheek. Most people who go there are simply on business, so they never bother to take the time to tour the facility. He added, but with classes cut short today we could go take that tour now if everyone is free. The cerulean-eyed pilot suggested. I just need to let Nunnally and Seiko know that I'd be going out, and I'll be ready to go. Lelouch said, being the first to answer. Shirley's club activities had been cancelled for the day. Millie and Nina didn't have anything to do that day. Rivals had the day free from his job, while Lloyd had told Suzaku that it wasn't necessary for him to go in that day. Colin, while interested to see what happened inside the Namikaze Corporation, saw anything that kept her out of her home as a good thing. That's fine, Naruto replied to Lelouch's statement. It'll take me a few minutes to get us a ride there and then bring everyone back anyway. The former Jinchuriki finished as he made a call on his phone. A few minutes later everyone was waiting outside. As a car pulled up to the clubhouse that was big enough to fit everyone, with Naruto standing beside his orange and black motorcycle. This car will take everyone to Namikaze Corp, and then bring you all back when we're done for the day, or wherever you need to be. Naruto explained, anyone wants to ride with me? He asked as he pulled out a second helmet, discreetly unsealing it but making it look like pulled it out from the seats compartment, and got on his custom motorcycle with Q sitting in front of him. I will. Millie volunteered cheerfully, putting on the helmet and sitting down behind Naruto. Wrapping her arms around his waist and not doing anything to hide the fact that she was feeling him up, as the young Uzumaki blushed lightly at the contact. Can you stop that? Naruto asked her pleadingly. Nope. The blonde Britannian answered chirpily, getting a groan from Naruto. Well, I guess we'll see you all there. The cerulean-eyed pilot finally said, doing his best to ignore Millie's actions before taking off. Colin watched the two blondes' retreating forms for as long as possible. She could feel the anger building up inside of her at what Millie was doing to the half-Britannian she was riding with. The redhead did her best to remind herself that Naruto was just her friend, so she had no reason to be angry, but that didn't seem to have any effect at all on what Colin was feeling. I guess we should go, Suzaku said, clearly finding amusement in his friend's situation, though he didn't notice that Colin didn't hold his amusement or that Rivals was slightly jealous of Naruto. as they all got in the car and headed toward the Namikaze Corporation. In another part of the Tokyo settlement, Cornelia sat within her office in the government building filling out some tedious paperwork. Guilford and Darlton helping her deal with some of the reports, when she heard a tentative knock on the door. "Come in," Cornelia instructed, elegantly signing another piece of paper. As the door opened and Euphemia walked in wearing an extravagant light violet and white dress, which gave a pleasant view of her chest with a choker around her neck that had a rose ornament attached at the front. "You wished to speak with me, Viceroy?" Euphemia asked, remembering how Cornelia told her how they should act more formally around each other, as she closed the door behind her. "Yes, Sub-Viceroy Euphemia. I wanted to inform you of my meeting with the head of the Namikaze Corporation, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, and my decision regarding your desire to support his company," Cornelia informed her, while Darlton and Guilford dutifully continued working silently, doing their best to seem like they weren't in the room with the two princesses. "And what decision have you reached?" Euphemia questioned hesitantly, her hands clasped in front of her as she waited for her sister's answer, as she did her best not to fidget and show just how nervous she was about Cornelia's decision. If Cornelia refused to allow Euphemia to give her support, then there wouldn't be anything she could do about her sister's decision. "I must admit that my meeting with Mr. Namikaze was not what I expected." The young man was respectful, calm. Despite the fact he was talking with such a high-ranking official over something so important, and confident. Without any of the arrogance I expected of someone who owns such a renowned company at such a young age. Cornelia began listing some of the things she had noticed about the blonde, with a smile spreading across Euphemia's face at every positive thing her sister had to say about her recently made friend. He clearly stated his reasons for wishing to help the 11s rebuild the Shinjuku ghetto without hesitation, and even gave a justification in how High's actions could help support the Britannian government. Euphemia tried her best to keep herself as unbiased as possible, but found herself struggling to keep up pretenses. "So what is it that you've decided, sister?" Euphemia asked again, her eagerness making her momentarily forget her older sister's request to speak formally with one another when in the presence of others. Cornelia let out a mental sigh at her younger sister's slip-up, but ultimately decided to let it go. Euphemia always tended to forget what was proper and expected of her as a princess, especially when it concerned helping others. She just did whatever she had to help others, not caring how she was viewed by the public, or what kind of situation she put herself in. Cornelia feared that someday her sister's good heart would result in her being hurt. Or worse. As long as no problems rise up because of the actions of the Namikaze Corporation, I approve of your wish to support the company in the reconstruction of the Shinjuku ghetto, along with any other 11 residencies that the Namikaze Corp reconstructs in the future. I will also be placing you in charge of all interactions between the government and the Namikaze Corporation. As such, I'll expect you to meet with them along with Mr. Namikaze every so often, with proper escort, so you may turn in appropriate reports to me periodically. Is that understood, Sub-Viceroy Euphemia? Understood, Viceroy, Euphemia answered, giving her sister a slight bow. Is that all? Yes, that is all. You can go now, Cornelia replied, dismissing her sister. Once the Sub-Viceroy left the room, Guilford turned his attention toward Cornelia. Your Majesty, with all due respect, do you honestly believe it is wise to allow Princess Euphemia to support the Namikaze Corporation? Or to even allow that company to proceed with their plans? Guilford asked the dark pink-haired princess. Why, Guilford, if I didn't know any better, I would think you doubted my judgment, Cornelia said humorously. Of course not, Viceroy, the black-haired man said hastily. Cornelia looked amused for a moment longer before turning serious. I am sure about my decision, Cornelia informed her two knights. Euphemia has made it clear that she wants to support the Namikaze Corporation, and without just cause I have no reason to deny her request, as it is well within her right as Sub-Viceroy. The Viceroy of Area 11 said plainly. As to the Namikaze Corporation, just because I put Euphi in charge, that doesn't mean that I won't be keeping my own eye on things. And I suppose we should not mention this fact to Princess Euphemia, Darlton stated indifferently, as he handed the second Britannian princess a paper for her to look over. No, this is to be kept between us, Cornelia replied, making sure her order was clear. Yes, Your Majesty, the two knights said at the same time. Standing in front of the Namikaze Corporation building, Naruto and Millie waited for the other members of the student council to arrive. Naruto having had his bike stored earlier, a couple of minutes later the other members were pulled up in the car that Naruto had called for. As everyone stood outside the BU building, they all looked on in awe of the famous company building that was the head of innovations in recent years. Stepping inside the building, everyone's attention was instantly drawn to the marble statue at the center of a water fountain. "Wow, she's beautiful," Colin said, looking at the stone image of Kushina. "She's my mother," Naruto spoke, walking up beside the red-headed girl, a small smile and his face as looked at his mother's statue. "So those are your parents?" the red-headed pilot asked him curiously, as the other members of the council listened silently. Naruto's smile turned into a grin as he answered, "Yeah. Kushina Uzumaki and Minato Namikaze, my mom and dad," he stated proudly. "You look a lot like your father," Shirley pointed out. Naruto nodded his head in agreement. "A pair. Ntly, I got my dad's looks and my mom's personality," the former Jinchuriki said, before he started walking toward the main elevator. "Alright, we will start the tour by going up to my office, so I can drop off my things. And then I'll show you all the rest of the building." Naruto finished, signaling to his security guards that everything was fine, and getting signs of agreement from the others. Stepping into the waiting room to his office, everyone was once more in a state of awe at the sheer size of it, before they followed after Naruto toward the only door on that floor. Entering the office, they noticed that it looked like your average office with a desk, chairs, a sofa, and TV screens mounted on the walls. The only thing that looked out of place was the elevator doors on one side of the room. "So let me get this straight," Rivals began, sitting down on the sofa and noticing how soft and comfortable it was. "You basically have an entire floor all to yourself?" he asked, almost in disbelief. "That's right," Naruto replied sheepishly, scratching the back of his head. "The other room is sort of a waiting room for people that have an important appointment with me personally. If not, there are other conference rooms inside the building that are used," the blonde Nightmare pilot told them. "And what's this for?" Millie asked, taking a closer look at the elevator doors inside of Naruto's office. "It's to take me up to my apartment," Naruto answered simply, drawing curious looks from everyone. "Apartment?" Millie repeated, not completely sure if she heard him right. "I live on the floor above this one," the shinobi stated. "There are only two ways to access it. Either the main elevator or this one, both of which need a passcode to get to it, so that without it, it would be impossible to get to my apartment. I'm guessing that it won't be included in the tour?" Lelouch asked jokingly. "Afraid not," Naruto said with a grin. "It's a real mess right now." "Oh, we don't mind a little mess," Millie said back with a sly grin. "If you have any underwear lying around, then it will just help solve the question all the girls at school have on whether you wear boxers or briefs." "Well, if I wasn't before, I sure want now," Naruto deadpanned, ignoring Q snickering that he could hear for their mental link as the fox jumped off his shoulder and laid down on one of the chairs located in his room. "Not wanting to take part in their tour. Something personal like that would be like me asking what color your underwear was." "Pink," Millie answered unashamedly. "Want to take a peek?" she asked her fellow blonde teasingly. All the boys turned different shades of red at Millie's offer, with Lelouch being the only one who was able to keep his composure. The girls' reactions were a little different. Nina had a light blush on her face, Shirley looked scandalized and seconds away from reprimanding Millie, and finally Colin had narrowed her eyes with a frown on her face, looking at Millie in displeasure. "Madam President, what are you saying? You shouldn't joke like that," Shirley told the class president. "I don't think I can take many jokes like that," Rivals muttered quietly to himself. Millie giggled at their reaction. "You guys need to relax and learn to have some fun," she said with amused smile. "Besides, I don't think Naruto minds if I joke with him like that, right Naruto?" The blonde-haired president asked Naruto flirtatiously. "I agree with Shirley, Madam President. I don't think you should joke around like that," Colin stated, "and I'm sure that Naruto agrees with me." "Isn't that right, Naruto?" the redhead asked, eyes closed and with a smile on her face. Though her voice didn't once change from its soft-spoken tone, it did carry a dangerous quality that Naruto seemed to pick up on right away. "Ah, that's right. Please stop, Madam President," Naruto said with a forced smile on his, a bit of sweat suddenly appearing and dripping down his face. Millie wasn't paying much attention to what Naruto was saying, as she was looking at Colin intently before a knowing smile appeared on her face. I see what's going on, she said cryptically. What are you talking about? Colin asked suddenly, very nervous. Oh, you're just too cute. Millie spoke happily, pulling the half-Japanese into a quick, if not somewhat, awkward hug before releasing her. Don't worry, I'll stop. I'm not the kind of girl that gets in the way of this kind of stuff. The blue-eyed Britannian said, giving the flustered redhead a wink. What? Colin stuttered out again, only for Millie to laugh good-naturedly at her. While the other older members of the council looked at her with various degrees of sympathy, knowing what she was in for in the future with their class president. I'm completely lost, Naruto stated, as Suzaku chuckled at how dense his friend was and Q shook her head in exasperation. I'm sure you'll understand, eventually. Suzaku told him honestly, whispering the last bit to himself. It's best not to think about it. Lelouch supplied helpfully. Okay, Naruto said unsurely. How about we get the tour really started then? The sapphire-eyed pilot asked, the others agreeing quickly. Most of all Colin, who wanted to move on and forget about the conversation they just had, wanting to see the rest of the Namikaze Corporation. What little they had seen on the way to Naruto's office had already been amazing, and they were anxious to see more. Naruto decided that the first stop on the tour would be the Research and Development Department, as it would be far more interesting than looking around a few offices of the more business-related section of the company. While everyone was excited to have a look at the new advances in technology, Suzaku not as much as others, since he spent so many hours during the day basically being surrounded by high-tech while at work. None were more so than Nina. The black-haired girl was basically radiating happiness and excitement as she looked around at all technology that was being developed and tested. The Research and Development Department, Naruto began, is responsible for the recent advances in technology, be it improvements in the things you use in your everyday life or the equipment that is used in the medical field. The blue-eyed shinobi explained. Of course, the R&D division is also responsible for testing and coming out with new products that can be sold to the public. So they will be responsible for the prizes that I'll be giving out during the ball. He pointed out. Any idea of what those prizes will actually be? Millie questioned him curiously. Naruto shook his head. Not yet, I have to make a list of what new products have recently come out and which ones should be ready by the time of the ball. Naruto answered. I also think it would be a good idea if we decide between the two of us what the final prizes will be. He said, Millie nodding her head in agreement. Yes, Tilda. A female voice yelled out happily. Cutting into the conversation, from a short distance away. The student council was surprised by the sudden shout and looked toward Naruto for a possible explanation, but the blonde seemed just as confused as they were, as he didn't recognize the voice and it sounded too young for it to belong to any of his workers. Walking toward the source of the voice, the group found a girl in her teens with light blue hair pulled into a short ponytail, wearing a short white lab coat and black skirt. She was pumping her fists up and down while shaking her hips, doing what appeared to be a small victory dance. Spinning around, the others could see that she had her eyes closed and that she had on a blue blouse, which covered a moderate-sized chest, a few bangs hanging in front of her face. As she continued to do her victory dance. I figured it out, Tilda. She stated happily with a cheerful smile on her face. Figured what out? Naruto asked her, making her freeze up with her hands still up in the air. And who are you? Opening her eyes revealed a set of pink-colored eyes looking at all of them embarrassingly, before her eyes settled on Naruto. Her expression swiftly changed from embarrassment to one of elation, and in a split second she was standing in front of the bewildered blonde, her hands clasped together in front of her face. Oh my god. The girl practically squealed, freaking out Naruto a little. You're Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. You're incredible. You are single-handedly responsible for creating and maintaining the Namikaze Corporation, and all the remarkable things that have happened in Japan because of it. All before even turning 18. You are an inspiration and my personal hero. The blue-haired girl declared, moving as close as to the blonde teen that she believed Naruto would let her. Much to Colin's hidden ire. Thank you, Naruto said unsurely with a nervous smile. But you haven't told me who you are or what you are doing here. the former Konoha shinobi pointed out. The girl's eyes widened as she recognized the truth in Naruto's statement, taking a couple of steps back. I'm so sorry. The girl said, frantically bowing repeatedly to the uncomfortable Namikaze Corp. owner. I must seem like a total weirdo suddenly coming up to you like that, and not even telling you who I am. I'm so sorry. She finished apologizing again at the end. Ah, don't worry about it. Naruto said, trying to sound reassuring, with a kind smile on his face, just tell us who you are. The Kyuubi pilot instructed gently. Right, the girl replied completely composed. Now a 180 from what she was not even a second ago. My name is Ariana Casterwill, but you can call me Arya. The self-introduced Arya said with a polite bow. It truly is a pleasure to meet you, Uzumaki-sama. You don't have to call me that, just Naruto is fine. The last Uzumaki said with a sheepish grin. Naruto-sama? Arya asked, tilting her head to the side in confusion and looking remarkably cute. No, just Naruto. The blonde insisted with an eyebrow twitch. Or if you have to use something then, Mr. is fine. I couldn't do that, Arya denied, frantically shaking her arms up and down. Calling you by your name like that would be wrong of me, and Mr. just isn't enough to describe how incredible you are, Naruto-sama. The blue-haired girl said with a determined look in her eyes. Yuto let out a sigh before he finally realized something. Wait, you said your last name was Casterwill, right? He asked her, getting a nod from the young Ms. Casterwill, as in Katarina Casterwill. That's right. A more mature voice answered from behind the group. Looking behind them, they saw a woman who looked to be an older version of Arya with darker colored hair that was tied in a ponytail, with her bangs framing her face, but came down to her mid-back. She wore a black skirt, a light green button-up shirt which gave the barest hint at her cleavage, and a white lab coat with an ID clipped onto it. I'm sorry if my daughter has been a bother to you, Mr. Uzumaki. I thought I was perfectly clear that she was to stay in my office and out of trouble, while she was here. She said, giving her daughter a faux disapproving look. That Arya answered with sheepish smile, as she walked to stand beside her. Being stuck in your office was boring, and I wanted to see more of the labs here. Ariana told her mother pacifyingly. So, I decided to take a small look around when I found a few scientists having trouble with something, so when they took a break I decided to take a look at it myself. And was able to figure out what was wrong. She finished excitedly. Is that so? Katarina said with an exasperated sigh, and then turned her gaze toward Naruto. She might not always seem like it, but my daughter is actually quite the prodigy. I taught her everything she knows. She has been dreaming of being able to come and work here for a while now. The blue-haired woman explained. I suppose. Say that is why she thought it would be a good idea to stick her nose where it didn't belong. I see, Naruto murmured amusedly before finally introducing his friends to the older woman. This is Katarina Casterwill. She is the head researcher in charge of the R&D department, and possibly the smartest woman I've ever met. The cerulean-eyed pilot informed them. Thank you for the compliment, Mr. Uzumaki, Katarina said with an amused laugh. Naruto then introduced the other council members to the two bluenets. Nina. This wouldn't be the same Nina Einstein that we've had our eye on, would it? The very same. Naruto answered with a nod. Katarina smiled gently at the girl. Well, Ms. Einstein, I hope to see you joining us sometime soon. I've heard many good things about you, she said, causing the black-haired glasses-wearing girl to become slightly embarrassed. Ah, thank you, Nina said with a flushed face, bowing her head at the woman's praise. My so polite, my daughter could learn a thing or two from you in that regard. Katarina said, teasing her daughter as Arya let out a huff, looking off to the side away from her mother with a pout on her face. Naruto chuckled at the light blue-haired girl's expense. Now, as funny as this has been, he paused to let out a chuckle at Arya's indignant shout, and whine about how they were being mean to her before continuing. Would you please explain what exactly you figured out? Arya. Of course, Arya replied excitedly before growing serious. From what I could gather from the scientists before I helped, they were having trouble figuring out the algorithm necessary to create a flow of energy that can be placed in what you could call a loop, so that the energy doesn't diminish while the battery is being used to produce flight, and doesn't need to be recharged or refueled after it is used. she said, walking to the nearby computer that she had been working on before everyone entered, and then continued, already guessing what they might ask next. Now, what makes this power source different from what is used in jets and planes is that it won't constantly need energy being fed into it and would be for smaller machines, at least that is what I've gathered. Really, the idea is quite amazing and highly advanced. I'm surprised that those dimwits were able to come up with it in the first place. That would be because they didn't come up with the idea. That honor belongs to our extraordinary boss here, Katerina informed her daughter, and at the same time embarrassing the blonde business owner. Mr. Uzumaki came up with the idea a few months ago and has been working on it whenever he can. He simply asked them to assist him with its development because of his busy schedule. The blue-haired woman explained. That makes sense, Arya said innocently. If it's Naruto-sama, then I don't doubt he would be able to think of something as amazing as this. The younger blue-haired girl stated confidently with a nod of her head. As if her statement made perfect sense. Wait, does that mean that you're creating hoverboards and cars? Rivals asked excitedly. What about a hover bike? Well, those are possibilities, Naruto acknowledged with a chuckle. But my top priority would be developing something for people in wheelchairs to give them more mobility and no longer be hindered by things like stairs, he said, and then turned to face Lelouch. I'd actually like to give one of these to Nunnally when they're made. Of course it would have to be modified to suit her needs specifically. Is there a problem? Katerina asked, with the concern only a mother could express. Naruto chose let Lelouch answer that question, as it was up to him on whether to talk about Nunnally's condition or not. My sister lost her ability to see when she was younger, Lelouch explained to the blue-haired woman, as he did his best to restrain his emotions that emerged when he recalled exactly how that happened. Turning to his attention, to his classmate, Lelouch gave the blonde student a grateful smile. Thank you for the offering to help Nunnally, Naruto, I really appreciate it. The black-haired student said honestly, his concern for our Nunnally and her well-being superseding anything else. The poor dear, I can see why that would be a concern, the head researcher said, as she paused for a moment to think about the problem. What if we were to include sensors to keep track of the immediate surrounding area? Oh, how about developing something similar to sonar for things farther away? Arya suggested helpfully. Those are both good ideas, Naruto remarked truthfully. But right now, how about we continue on with the tour? Arya, you're more than welcome to join us, the blonde shinobi said, with Ariana quickly agreeing. Anything to get the chance to spend more time with her hero. With a pleasant smile, Naruto turned to Elder Bluenet. Drive, Casterwill. I can't think of anyone better to give us a tour of the R&D department than its head researcher. So what do you say? I would be delighted, Mr. Uzumaki, Katerina answered. The head researcher proceeded to show the members of the student council, along with her daughter, the rest of the research and development division and the many projects and experiments that were being made. Most of the things that they were shown and discussed seemed to go right over the heads of the academy students, as the technology would have been better placed in a science fiction movie rather than real life. Of course, Nina did understand what was talked about, and she was simply awed by everything that was being developed, and made her want to actually join the company all that much more. The indigo-eyed girl had noticed that there were 11s present, but she was able to keep hers calm, mostly because she could distract herself from noticing who they were by focusing on the inventions, and because she felt secure being she was surrounded by her friends. Finishing showing them around, Katerina turned to her boss. If I may, what is the next stop on your tour, Mr. Uzumaki? The researcher asked. Naruto looked thoughtful for a moment before answering. I think I'll show them the gardens before heading on into medical division, he supplied. I see, Katerina murmured with a knowing smile. I'll be sure to send word of your intentions to the head of the department. She saw it looking as if she was trying hard not to laugh for some unknown reason to the majority of those there. Right, Naruto muttered. Another thing, sir, Katerina began. I'd like to give both my daughter and Ms. Einstein a more thorough and in-depth tour of the R&D department, she informed the blonde shinobi. I don't see anything wrong with you giving Arya a more detailed tour, Naruto stated with a shrug. But it is up to Nina if she wants to join you, he finished, looking toward the shy black-haired girl. Nina started unsurely. Come on Nina, go for it. Shirley spoke up, giving her friend an encouraging smile. It was obvious that you were just enjoying yourself and you're probably the only one of us who knew what was actually going on. Yeah, and if you're going to work here someday then you should definitely see what it is all about. Rivals noted with his own grin. Looking toward her other friends and fellow council members, they all encouraged their friend to agree. Turning her gaze back to the chief researcher and whiskered blonde, Nina gave a small hesitant nod with an equally small smile. Arya in the meanwhile stood off to the side with a pout on her face. Disappointed that she wouldn't get to spend any more time with Naruto-sama. Nina, Naruto began drawing the black-haired girl's attention to him. I want to know how you'd feel about an internship at R&D section of the Namikaze Corporation. The shinobi stated. An internship? Nina questioned somewhat hopefully. It wasn't a job offer but it still meant that she would be given the opportunity to work in such an amazing place. Yes, an internship, Naruto replied with a smile. I can't offer you an actual job position because of your anxieties. But we can work on it, and if you show improv, then actual employment will definitely be a possibility in the future. In the meantime you can get used to working here under Drive Casterwill's jurisdiction. Nina considered the offer for a sec. And thought over everything that was said. It was true that she still had some issues to work through, but she could honestly say that if it meant that she could work here then she would put in her best effort to overcome them. She had already proven that she could ignore what their nationality was as long as she stayed focused on her work. So with a resolute nod Nina gave Naruto her answer of acceptance and thanked him for his offer. That's good then, welcome to the Namikaze Corporation, Nina. I'll meet with the principal of Ashford to see about setting up a schedule, so that you can still attend classes and come here afterwards. Naruto said, after everyone congratulated Nina on accepting, before turning to face the still saddened Arya. Now Ms. Casterwill, I believe your mother said something about you working here. He questioned, causing the light blue-haired girl to perk up slightly. From what I saw today alone you are more than qualified in regards to understanding everything that is being developed. Proving your mother's claim about your intelligence, and finding solutions to problems that some of the other scientists were having with their research. As such I'd like to offer you a job here. On a trial basis of course, in case this turns out to be more than you can handle, or not what you want to do. Do you accept? Naruto asked her. Yes, of course I accept. Arya answered instantly. Thank you for this chance, I promise not to let you down. The pink-eyed girl swore, taking Naruto's hand in hers and shaking it. Naruto just smiled at her before turning toward Katarina. Take as much time as you want showing them around. Naruto informed her, I'll be sure to have another car ready to take Nina back to Academy once you're all done. He finished, the older woman nodding her head in understanding. Separating from the three science geniuses, the remaining members of the tour group left the R&D department, and moved on to what Naruto told them would be an indoor garden connected to the medical research department. Entering the garden, the 6 remaining council members were shocked by the size of the garden that would more properly called a medium-sized park. They could see trees, along with bushes, a few benches scattered around the place that were occupied by a few people that seemed to be relaxing, and a variety of different kinds of flower beds. There was even a small river going through the middle of the park. This place is incredible, Colin said, closing her eyes for a moment to take in the scent of all the nearby flowers. I'll say, Millie agreed. It's all so beautiful, Shirley added, her gaze shifting around to take in everything that she could. Thanks, Naruto said with his fox-like grin. I'm the one that takes care of this place, so I'm glad you all like it. He finished, gaining mildly surprised looks from the others. Is that so? Millie questioned with a smile, who would have thought the great Naruto Uzumaki had such a green thumb. She said rhetorically. Seriously though, Rivals said, is there nothing you can't do? The short blue-haired academy student asked. Well, I've never tried my hand at painting, Naruto answered. Scratching the back of his head sheepishly. And I'm sure that there are other things as well. That sounds like the kind of thing that a person that everything comes naturally to would say. Lalo. UCH remarked good-naturedly and in an amused tone. That actually sounds a lot like you, Lulu, Shirley said. It doesn't ever look like you try too hard to do anything. Is that so? I've never noticed. Lelouch replied lightly with a smile. For me it's actually the opposite. Naruto admitted, drawing everyone's attention back to him, as he reminisced about the past. If you would have met me when I was around 12, then you would think that I was an idiot that would never be able to do or attain anything. The blonde shinobi revealed, catching everyone by surprise. The idea that the person in front of them was an idiot seemed like such a foreign concept that it was completely impossible in their minds. But everything that I've achieved is the result of me pushing myself to my very limit. And then kept going till I'd almost pass out where I stood, be it physically or mentally. That sounds insane, Suzaku said, stupefied by Naruto's resolve and drive exceed his limitations. Probably, Naruto concurred evenly. But because of it I've been able to build this company and help so many people. He continued before a smile spread across his face. But enough about that, let's get back on track. This garden, along with a rec room, a library, and a gym were all built to help people take a break and relax. We can take a look at those places as well later. I can see why, Millie said with a content sigh. It must be very nice to just spend the day here relaxing. Wait, rec room? Rivals questioned. Yeah, but people here are usually always so serious that it's more like my own private game room. Naruto revealed. Hey Naruto, what is that? Colin asked, pointing towards a glass wall with automated glass doors, with what looked like an extended part of the garden on the other side. The Ashford Academy students could even see the small river continued on the other side. That is one of the entrances to the medical research division. Naruto answered, as he began a leisurely walk towards it, with everyone following behind him. Crossing into the other room, the small group was instantly surrounded by a few security guards. Did we do something wrong? Shirley asked nervously, looking at all the guards. Even though she knew that couldn't be possible since they were there with owner. While outwardly Lelouch looked confused, his mind was currently racing, trying to come up with plans and backup plans in case these guards posed a threat to him and the others. Colin looked at the guards as well, her gaze hardened, ready to put up a fight and knock as many of them out. How she hoped that it wouldn't come to that, as it would expose the fact that she wasn't as weak and feeble as she was supposed to be. No, not at all. A man that was obviously Japanese with dark brow and hair and black eyes, wearing a button-up shirt, dark-colored dress pants, and the expected white lab coat, answered. He had a smile on his face that was filled with obvious amusement. These good fellows are here to keep an eye on Mr. Uzumaki, to make sure that he doesn't get near any of the plants. He explained. I'm Soichiro Higurashi, by the way, chief researcher in charge of the medical division. Huh, why not? Millie questioned. After introducing herself and the others, wondering why Naruto wasn't allowed near any of the plants. Oh, the answer is really quite amusing. The brown-haired man replied with a chuckle. Naruto cut in at that moment. It's because I can't tell the difference between medicinal herbs and weeds. The blonde shinobi remarked dryly. I can take care of the most exotic plants without any trouble. But when it comes to herbs, Naruto trailed off at the end. They all seem to die. Higurashi supplied with a pleasant smile, earning a glare from his teenage boss. So I guess you really can't do everything, huh? Rivals asked jokingly, getting a grunt in reply from Naruto, as the others laughed lightly at his expense. Can we get on with the tour? Naruto asked. Though it didn't come out sounding out like one. Of course, Soichiro replied cheerfully, if you will please follow me. Soichiro proceeded to give them a tour of the medical facilities, and an explanation about everything that the medical division was responsible for both within and outside the company. Higurashi also revealed how they worked alongside the R&D department to develop any new technology that would make medical advancements possible. The student council members really enjoyed the tour of the facility, and were grateful that so many intelligent and kind individuals were working so hard to improve medical treatment. After they left the medical division, Naruto showed his friends the rest of company, stopping by the cafeteria and enjoying the almost 5-star foods that were being served. He also included a stop at the library and rec room like he had promised, and spent some time relaxing in both places. They eventually returned to the front lobby when Naruto finished the tour of the company. Now what? Rivals asked, questioning what they'd do now that the tour of Namikaze Corp was over. Well, Naruto began walking up to the group, having been talking to the receptionist in the lobby and gotten a few files. I can have the car take you back or we can continue the tour by heading toward Shinjuku. The blonde shinobi offered them. Would that be okay? Surely said with some trepidation evident in her voice. I mean we wouldn't want to get in the way or anything. It'd be fine. Naruto reassured her, you guys can just check it out and help a bit if you want. I'll go. Suzaku stated resolutely, determined to help out rebuild one of Japan's destroyed cities any way he could. I'd like to go as well. Colin said softly she wanted to see for herself what exactly Naruto was doing to help rebuild Shinjuku and those living there. Of course she would have to be extra careful not to be recognized by anyone there. The remaining members took longer to decide on whether to go or not. While Millie, Shirley, and Rivals didn't have the same fear of going there and the people that called the Shinjuku ghetto home as Nina, they were still hesitant of going. Louch contemplated what would happen as a result of him choosing to go or not. Eventually they all agreed once Naruto reassured them that everything would be okay, Lelouch having no other choice but to agree once everyone else did, seeing as he didn't really have a good enough reason to skip out. Good, I just need to take care of a few quick things and then we can go. Naruto told them before walking to the receptionist and relaying some quick instructions and then returned. Okay, let's go, the sapphire-eyed pilot said. Hey, Naruto, if you don't mind me asking, but is it normal for you to rely on your receptionist like that? For her to hold files like those for you? Millie asked him curiously. She helps me often actually. Usually with minor stuff like this or if something suddenly comes up, Naruto answered. I should probably hire a personal assistant to help me with the day-to-day things though. He finished plainly. In another part of the building Arya's ear suddenly twitched. Uzumaki. A male voice shouted loudly. Which 3 male members of the student council recognized, 2 from hearing it once before and the other for having to deal with the person on multiple occasions. Making his way toward them, with a smug sneer on his face, was the nobleman that Lelouch had played in a game of chess against the day he first obtained his Gios. I've been looking for you, the nobleman stated with an insincere smile. Looking at the blonde pilot, everyone was surprised to see his demeanor change from what they were used to seeing. The expression on his face was one of apathy, his eyes half-lidded in boredom and disinterest, as he watched the brown-haired man approached. Ah, Darius, what a pleasant surprise, what can I do for you? Naruto asked politely, and though his smile was far more sincere than the nobleman's, it was obvious to the student council members that it was all for the sake of looking courteous. The aforementioned Darius seemed to grow visibly angry at Naruto's casual tone of speaking to him. As disrespectful to your betters as always, I see. Darius said scornfully. You should learn to call me by my appropriate title, boy. I am Lord Dung to you. The brown-haired noble stated almost proudly. The members of the student council were looking at the man incredulously, not believing that this man wanted to be called Lord Dung. Right, Lord Dung. Naruto ate dryly, silently wondering if the man was really that stupid. At the very least, if he really wanted people to use his title, then have them call him Lord Darius. Is there something I can do for you? The former Jinchuriki asked again. Actually, it's more like what I can do for you, Lord Dung said pompously. With the Emperor's statement, the Namikaze Corporation is all but finished with you in command. But in my infinite mercy, I'll do you the honor, by letting you sell your company to me, so that it may have someone who is truly worthy owning it and directing it. He finished smugly. Naruto just started to chuckle lightly, much to the surprise of his friends, as if what Darius had was some kind of joke, which to him it really was. Naruto's next words were spoken plainly as if to a child. Lord Dung, that really is quite the generous offer, but completely unnecessary. I can assure you that I can run my company, and despite what you may think, just because you are a pure-blooded Britanni. And that does not mean that you are more fit than I to run a company, especially Namikaze Corporation. I believe that it was your lack of ability in understanding how to run a business that resulted in your own company falling through, leaving you with no other choice, if the rumors are to believed, but to act like a common thug terrorizing business owners for profit, Naruto stated, all of it calming out, sounding like if they were simply talking about the weather. You ruined my company, Darius snarled, his voice steadily rising in volume. I simply did what any businessman would do, ran my business to the best of my ability. Naruto replied evenly. I did not, and do not, cheat or take part in any illegal backdoor deals. If your company fell through, it was because it couldn't compete with mine. And you simply weren't capable of running it. You insolent. Lord Dung all but roared. Taking a closer look at the blonde's expression, the Britannian nobleman saw the same bored look the boy always wore whenever they spoke. Even now, that look in your eye, as if you were better than me, looking down on me. I am Lord Darius Dung, how dare a worthless half-bred like you look down on me? Ah, so Naruto was the one you were talking about back then, Lelouch said, smiling, bringing the noble's attention to him. I was curious, even if only for a second, at who you were referring to back then. You, Darius yelled, recognizing the Britannian student. I should have realized then that you were an acquaintance, Uzumaki. I think that is enough. I've spent enough time on you for today, Darius. The first think it is time you left. Naruto said, signaling for his security. Please leave now, Darius, and I'll ask you not to return again. Darius Dung scowled at the boy as the two security guards put their hands on his shoulders and proceeded to forcefully escort him out of the building. Listen well, Uzumaki, you haven't heard the last of me. I'll make you pay for your impertinence and make sure that you finally remember who your betters are. The man shouted, as he was led out the door and away from the premises. What is that guy's problem? Shirley questioned, angry with how the noble spoke to her friend and Lelouch. Darius Dung is, besides obviously stupid from his insistence in being called Lord Dung, a narrow-minded bigot and bully. Naruto answered. I've been forced to end his presence on multiple occasions, and the result is always the same. With him leaving after proclaiming that he is better than me, and me proving how untrue that is. He continued, but enough about that, let's get going. The Kyuubi pilot finished, leading everyone outside to the car that was waiting for them. Minutes later, as the student council were making their way toward the Shinjuku ghetto. And Naruto was looking over a few files that his receptionist had given him, Rivals asked him a question that the blue-haired boy had been wondering for a while about. Hey Naruto, Rivals began. I've been wondering why exactly you are attending Ashford. It's not like you really need to, you're the owner of $1 million company after all. So why waste your time with going to school? The blue-haired Britannian student asked. Actually, I've been wondering that myself. Suzaku added, the others voicing their similar curiosity at the question. Well, Millie actually explained one of the reasons earlier. Naruto started. One reason was to make connections with the future generation that will be in charge of their family businesses and those from prominent families. He said, beginning his explanation. Like me, Colin stated, not asked, disdainfully. She felt angry, and though refused to admit it even to herself, disappointed with the fact that the only reason Naruto had gotten to know her and been so nice was because he wanted something from her. I should have known better. The red-headed resistance pilot thought to herself. The Statfeld name did carry a lot of power behind it after all. Even in the Britannian homeland, so why wouldn't the owner of a company want to get close to the sole heiress? Actually, you fall under the second reason. Naruto replied honestly. Isol. Why, guessing what the ocean blue-eyed girl was thinking. After all, more than one person had tried getting closer to him just to get something out in return. The other reason I decided to attend Ashford was to make friends. It is kind of hard to make friends when running a business, especially ones your own age that aren't interested in only what they could get out of the friendship. He finished, looking right at her and giving her a genuine smile. I see, Colin said, returning Naruto's smile with one of her own. Sky blue eyes met ocean blue ones, and the two simply stared silently at one another for a moment. Before that moment was broken by the sound of Millie's voice. We'd offer to leave you alone so that you can have your moment, but that is kind of impossible right now. Millie spoke with a teasing smile on her face that had both Naruto and Colin blushing lightly, while the others let out a few chuckles at their discomfort. So what do you got there? She asked, referring to the files that Naruto was looking over. Changing the subject in rare choice to show mercy to her embarrassed victims instead of continuing to tease them. They're just some of the contracts for the voluntary workers helping reconstruct Shinjuku. Naruto answered. There are two different kinds that I need to look over. What's the difference? Shirley asked curiously. The first contract is a day-to-day basis. It is a short-term contract where the contracted is only expected to work for one day and get paid for that one day. The other contract is long-term, where a person will work for Namikaze Corp. As long as they want. Or until their contract is justly terminated, and they are paid at the end of the week. Naruto explained, as he looked through another contract, of course those with long contracts earn more than those that have a day-to-day contract. He finished. Why are you looking them over? Suzaku questioned his blonde friend. I'm just familiarizing myself with files of everyone that's been contracted and making sure everything is in order. Naruto replied. Is there any chance I could sign up for one of those day-to-day contracts? Rivals asked him. I don't see why not. The cerulean-eyed shinobi answered. We'd have to wait until we get there for you to sign a contract since I don't have any blank ones with me. That's fine, I could really use the extra cash. Rivals said with a smile. You should know that the day-to-day contracts also depend on how much work you put in, it's so people can't get paid for doing nothing or just a little. Naruto added, though. Rivals was fine with it and accepted the terms. I'd like to help as well, Millie said. Is there anything I can do? Oh, me too, Shirley added enthusiastically. Lelouch, Suzaku, and Colin also voiced their interest to help wherever they could. Lelouch didn't need the money or felt any sort of obligation to actively help with the reconstruction, but he did feel that it was a good opportunity to observe the Japanese and look for possible excuses he could use to help convince them to help him in his zero persona if the need ever arose. Suzaku and Colin on the other hand didn't think they could just sit back and watch as their people worked to rebuild their lives. When they eventually reached the site, the first thing they saw was the residents of Shinjuku hard at work clearing what debris they could, while others worked on repairing whatever homes they could. The Japanese people having been instructed that one of the first things that should be restored were the residences, so as many people could have an actual home as quickly as possible. The full-blooded Britannians, with the exception of Lelouch, fidgeted slightly just standing there feeling out of place amongst people that had been left with so little because of their government. Colin and Suzaku were filled with a sense of pride and happiness at seeing their people getting back a sense of what they lost because of the war. Though Suzaku also felt some regret deep within him. It didn't take long for the whispers and the looks of discontent to start being sent their way once the inhabitants of Shinjuku realized they were there. But along with the looks of displeasure that was being directed at them, there were also smiles and looks of gratitude, most of which were solely for the male blonde student that was standing at their side. Soon enough Naruto saw Nagata make his way toward them. Hey there boss. Nagata greeted his employer, as he tried not to act like he knew Colin. Glad to see you here, Nagata. Naruto returned his greeting with a nod of his head, before gesturing to his fellow students. These are my friends Millie, Shirley, Colin, Rivals, Lelouch, and Suzaku. He continued pointed to each one of them when they were being introduced. They'd like to help us out today with the rebuilding, we'll need some of the day-to-day contracts. The former Konoha shinobi said and then turned to the Ashford Academy students. This is Nagata, I put him in charge of overseeing this operation while I'm not here. He handles the paperwork and keeps track of the supplies on site to make sure that there is enough for everyone. After everyone was contracted to work for Namikaze Corp. For the day, Nagata and Naruto separated them to their specific duties. Colin, Millie, and Shirley were instructed to watch over the younger children, in a sort of daycare that the Namikaze Corporation had set up. Suzaku, Rivals, Lelouch were asked to help with the clearing of the debris. Lelouch had to be given a different job when it became obvious that he couldn't handle the physical work, so instead he was to help Nagata dealing with the administrative work. Naruto of course also helped remove debris whenever he wasn't looking over the plans for Shinjuku's restoration and what area would be best to work on next. A few hours later the girls were playing with the children, doing their best to keep them entertained. When Nagata walked into the building that daycare was being held in. I trust everything is going well, Nagata asked pleasantly, sending a subtle glance in Colin's direction. Everything's fine, Millie answered with a smile. That's good, Nagata said. I just came to tell you that we'll be having dinner in about half an hour, so that we can have the kids ready, and you are of course welcome to join us. Dinner? Shirley asked, surprised before looking at the clock located in the room and noticing what time it was. Wow, I can't believe it's gotten so late already. I guess we were having so much fun playing with the children that none of us really noticed what time it was. The orange-haired girl observed. At that moment one of the children walked up to Nagata with an excited look in his eye. Will Naruto-Nisan be making the food again? He asked hopefully, wanting to taste the delicious food that Naruto was able to prepare last time again, a sentiment that was shared by all the other children. Yup, Nagata answered with slight grin. He even told me that he's getting some delicious dessert ready. The black-haired Japanese man stated, the children immediately cheering at the news. But that you're only going to get it if you all are washed up. He finished, the kids eagerly nodding their heads before rushing off to get ready. Naruto can cook? Colin asked stupefied. I didn't know that. The redhead said definitely. Yeah, it came as a surprise to all of us as well, but he's actually very good at it. Naruto replied. Excuse me Nagata, I've been wondering something. Millie spoke up, drawing the Japanese man's attention to her. I've noticed that the children add the word, Nisan, to the end of Naruto's name. What does that mean? It's a term of endearment that children use for someone they look up to. That means, older brother, which can be used for someone that isn't necessarily related to them. Nagata answered, the reason they call him that is because to a lot of them this is the first time they have been given the chance to experience an actual childhood filled with toys and games, and not have to worry on whether they will go to sleep that night hungry. Or if they will have to wake up early the next day and help their parents search out the city for anything they can salvage. He finished, a look of respect and admiration clearly evident on his face. Naruto's really done a lot for the people here, hasn't he? Colin questioned, a small fond smile spreading on her face, at hearing everything he's done for the children. Who at that moment were rushing to clean themselves and the room they were in, up. A lot more than many of us ever thought. Nagata replied, as he remembered that in the past the resistance members had believed that the owner of the Namikaze Corp had only ever done what would earn him money for his company. And this isn't the only thing he's working on personally to help others. Colin continued, remembering his plans for people stuck in wheelchairs. Naruto might have offered to give Nunnally a custom-made one, but with everything Colin had learned about him in the time she has known him, she was sure that he was more than ready to give them all away despite how financially unsound it might be. I don't doubt it, Nagata said, his admiration for the younger man growing to almost match the attitude he felt towards Kurama for saving his life. You know, Colin, Naruto really is amazing. Millie said, gaining the Japanese and half-Japanese attention, the two of them nearly forgetting that Millie and Shirley were there. If I were you I'd stake my claim before another girl does. She said teasingly. Oh, do you happen to like Naruto, Colin? Nagata asked his friend, enjoying the way that the blush that had appeared at the blonde girl's teasing had grown dark enough to match the color of Colin's hair. It's nothing like that. Colin insisted frantically, though she knew that no matter how much she denied it Nagata would still tell the others. We're just friends. Right, the black-haired Japanese said dubiously with a smirk on his face. You could do worse for a potential boyfriend, you know. Nagata told her. Colin had to admit that Nagata had a point, but that didn't mean she had to come right out and say it. Didn't you say that dinner was almost ready? She questioned. The older black-haired man in an attempt to change the subject, we should get going. The red-headed pilot finished. Alright, let's get going. Nagata replied in relenting tone of voice. Is everyone ready? He asked, turning to the children who had been patiently waiting. Hi. They all answered at the same time. A couple of minutes later saw the members of the student council, with the exception of Naruto, sitting together at one of the tables that had been set out. Rivals had his head lying against the table, clearly worn out from the day's work, while Suzaku was also noticeably tired. He was faring much better than his blue-haired classmate. Man, I'm completely exhausted. Rivals managed to get out. It wasn't that bad, Suzaku said, smiling in clear amusement. Rivals let out a groan at Suzaku's statement. You know what? I agree with Lelouch, you really are a health nut. How can't you be tired after all of that? He questioned the brown-haired Japanese boy incredulously, only for Suzaku to let out a sheepish chuckle. Right then several of the residents that were acting sort of like waiters started to bring out the food that had been prepared. To say that the members of the student council were astonished at the food that was being presented was an understatement. It looked far better than anything they had seen at the Namikaze Corporation's cafeteria earlier that day. Naruto made all of this? Colin asked no one in particular. Yeah, are you surprised? Naruto inquired, showing up, getting nods from everyone there who looked to be only seconds away from drooling. Well, to be fair, I did have help making it all. He continued while rubbing the back of his head. From what I heard, you're still the one who is responsible for making the food so delicious. Nagata said, walking up to the table that they were all sitting at with the other resistance members. Is it all right if we sit with you? Colin felt slightly nervous, not to mention angry at Nagata, at having all her of friends grouped together and the possibility of her, or one of the others, accidentally letting something slip out and revealing her true identity and her involvement with the resistance. Damn it, Nagata. What the hell are you thinking? Colin mentally shouted at the long black-haired man. Sure. Naruto answered, welcoming them. Thanks, Nagata said before introducing the academy students to his friends. These are my friends Ogi, Inoue, Minami, Yoshida, Kento, and the one with the attitude problem there is Tamaki. It'd be best if you just ignore him. He finished introducing his friends. Hey, Tamaki shouted in affronted. Oh, before I forget here. Naruto said, handing each of the members of the student council a check. Normally you'd be given the money for the time you put in. But I think a check would be simpler for all of you. I don't think I can accept this. Suzaku said, looking at the check in his hand sorrowfully. It's yours, Suzaku, you've worked hard for it. Naruto told him. It just feels wrong for me to accept this. The brown-haired Japanese replied. Then do whatever you want with it. Naruto stated, donate the money if that's what you want to do, it's yours to do with whatever you want, Suzaku, so just take it. He finished, getting a nod from the green-eyed teen. With the dramatics done, for the moment, everyone turned their attention back to what mattered most at the moment, i.e. the food. This all looks so good. Shirley gushed. Seriously, Naruto, we find out there is one thing you can't do and then you come out with this. Rivals added in. Let's not focus on that right now and just enjoy the food. Naruto said, and as if that was some sort of signal, everyone, with the exception of the student council, shouted an itadakimasu before digging into their food. What was that? Millie asked, the others just as curious as the blonde Britannian girl, looking around. It's a Japanese tradition. Suzaku surprised everyone by answering. Quote, it's done just before eating and means something along the lines of, let's eat, or, thanks for the food. He supplied before saying his own, itadakimasu, and enjoying the meal. Is that so? Millie mumbled. Before she and the others tried it out for themselves, only Colin actually managing to pronounce it correctly. After a few minutes of enjoying their meal and polite conversation, when Nagata sked Naruto about the plans he had been looking over earlier. I was looking over the blueprint for the Tokyo Metropolitan Government Building, the building with twin towers over there, Naruto point. To the leaning building for the benefit of the student council. I'm trying to figure out what to do with it. What do you mean? Ogi asked the blonde teen. For starters, Naruto began. The building is structurally unsafe. It could collapse at any moment if enough pressure is applied, which means that it will have to be rebuilt from the ground up. He said, pausing for a second before continuing. The other problem is finding out what exactly we're going to do with it. Because Britannia abolished Japan's governing body, we need to find a new purpose for it. The shinobi stated. Do you have any ideas? Colin asked him with an eyebrow raised in question. Yeah, Naruto said, nodding his head. I'm thinking of turning it into a branch facility for the Namikaze Corporation, so the Reseiden TS of Shinjuku have something close by that they can rely on in case of emergencies. I'm thinking of renaming the building Hypnos. I couldn't help myself. The sapphire-eyed boy explained, saying, the last part mostly to himself, and then turned his attention to Nagata. I'm going to need you to make sure everyone knows what I'm planning to do, so they can decide for themselves if they find that acceptable. He instructed. Got it, Nagata said with a nod. Enough with the business talk. Millie said, cutting into the conversation. After working hard all day you should relax, Tilda. She finished. Playfully stretching out the last word a bit. I can't take this anymore. Tamaki suddenly shouted. Tamaki, Ogi said warningly. Right now wasn't the time for his brown-haired friend to lose his temper. Nagata turned to student group with an apologetic look in his eyes. Sorry, just do your best to ignore him if you can. Nagata told them. How can you all just sit there across from the enemy and a traitor like nothing's wrong? Tamaki demanded, he's sitting there complaining about all the work, who the hell do you think is responsible for it all? The brunette continued pointing a finger at the wide-eyed rivals. Hey, what the hell is your problem? Millie shouted back, standing up from her seat and slamming her hands on the table, rattling the food a bit. My problem? You're all my problem. Tamaki retorted angrily. Tamaki, I've warned you before about this sort of thing. Naruto said calmly, though if you listened close enough you could hear the edge in his voice. Like I give a damn. The angry Japanese man replied, not caring about the fact that he was talking to his employer. Hey, shut up already. A voice shouted from behind Tamaki. Turning around, Tamaki was about to tell off whoever was yelling at him, only to be surprised when he saw he was being glared at by nearly everyone there. Unsurprisingly, Tamaki's shouts had been loud enough for everyone to hear. They're here helping us. Someone else in the crowd shouted. Who cares where they are from, or who they are, as long as they are doing something to help. Yeah, the Naysans were really nice. A child's voice shouted over the crowd. Nagata took that moment to quickly explain that last sentence to the girls. Naysan is like the suffix Nisan and means, older sister. Nagata supplied with a smile. Seems like you made your own impression on them, he finished, his smile turning into a grin. Thanks, Millie said unsurely. But don't you think the same way your friend does? She asked him, as she spared a glance toward Tamaki, who was being attacked verbally by all the residents of the rebuilding Shinjuku. No, not at all, Nagata immediately replied. I mean with someone like Naruto doing a verit hingi for can for everyone, and after spending some time with him, then I don't see how anyone really could. He paused to once more smile apologetically at them. It's just that Tamaki is a bit more opinionated. You know what? I'm out of here, Tamaki shouted, drawing everyone's attention back to him, as he stormed off. Well, so much for having a relaxing dinner, Naruto said, trying to lighten the mood. It might not having been all that relaxing, Lelouch began, but the little dinner show was sort of entertaining. He finished smiling, somewhat, in amusement. I was going to suggest this before, but Naruto could sing us a song to help everyone relax, Millie said before turning her gaze toward her fellow blonde. What do you say? No, Naruto refused right away. It's not like I can get the other members of the band here anyway. He continued, knowing that last part was a lie since the other members were just shadow clones using the transformation jutsu. That's fine, you can just sing a solo then. Besides, I'm not giving you much of a choice on the matter, the council president replied before turning toward the crowd. Hey, does anyone have a guitar or something? Naruto's agreed to sing a song for us, Millie shouted out to them. Here, I managed to salvage one Japanese man said as he brought over a guitar, though worn, still looked playable. Take care of it please, he pleaded, handing the guitar over to the reluctant teen with whisker markings on his cheeks, who assured him that he would take good care of it. Naruto let out a sigh, as he looked at the expectant gazes that everyone was sending him. One song and that's it. He relented too much cheering. Moving to stand where everyone could clearly see and hear him, Naruto began to sing. Listen to the ing swing life away by Rise Against here if you want, if not let's continue. After Naruto was finished singing, everyone started to cheer for him. Handing the guitar back to its owner, Naruto made his way back toward the table the Ashford Student Council and Resistance members were sharing. He briefly wondered how the Britannian students would react if they learned who exactly they were sharing a table with. See, that wasn't so bad, Millie said to Naruto once he joined them. Whatever, Naruto mumbled with a light blush on his face. It was different to sing in front of his friends compared to singing in front of strangers. After everyone enjoyed the meal that he had prepared, Naruto proceeded to take the members of the student council back to their respective dwellings in the car that had been chauffeuring them around all day. The last person who he was escorting home was Colin, who stayed in the Statfeld home, which was really a mansion more than a home, where Naruto proceeded to walk her to the front door. You didn't have to do this, Colin pointed out to him. Probably, Naruto admitted, but I still wanted to, he added, and then continued speaking. So what do you think about everything that happened today? The cerulean-eyed pilot asked her curiously. It was interesting, Colin eventually answered after a moment of thought, as she recalled everything she saw earlier that day. Yeah, that tends to happen a lot when I'm around. An old friend would always call it troublesome. Naruto said with a chuckle. Of course he found everything that didn't involve sleeping or cloud watching troublesome. He added as an afterthought. Colin stared at him for a moment, trying not to pay attention just how good he looked while smiling. You know, you're different from what I thought you would be. The redhead told him. The blonde shinobi just gave her a curious look at her statement. Oh, how so? Naruto asked her with a raised eyebrow. It's how you treat everyone and how you want to help them. The ocean blue-eyed half-Japanese pilot began. It's not like how a rich businessman, who's focused on mostly how much profit they will gain, would act. And it's different fr. How a famous person would pretend to be nice to others for the sake of the camera. You genuinely care about others and don't seem to care how it makes you look towards others. Colin said, telling him what she honestly thought. I guess it would be because I understand how they feel. Naruto replied. What do you mean? Colin asked him curiously. Even before the war my childhood wasn't exactly the best. Naruto said, distantly, revealing a bit of his past to Colin, but making sure to change it just enough so he didn't reveal that he was from a different dimension. I grew up with nearly nothing. There were people who looked after me from time to time, but for the most part one was on my own. When I established the Namikaze Corporation, my past was one of the reasons I decided that I would help all those that I could. He told her definitely. Colin stared at him, wondering exactly what kind of childhood he had to make him feel so strongly about helping others. It honestly amazed her too. See someone with so much determination in them that wasn't fueled by anger. Most of the members of the resistance were fighting against Britannia out of some sense of revenge or duty for their ruined country. Nagata, until recently when his life was saved by Kurama, fought mostly for revenge for his lost family. Ogi fought to free Japan because he knew that it was the right thing, but his self-confidence was an issue that most times it left him second-guessing himself. While Colin also fought for her home country, she also did it in memory of her brother, Naoto. But Naruto wasn't weighted down by anger. He might not be fighting against Britannia directly, but he was still bringing about changes that were definitely helping the Japanese. You really are something else. Colin eventually said, as Naruto gave her his patented fox-like grin. Before anything more could be said, the door to the Statfeld home was opened by a woman wearing simple maid clothing with a white apron. She had slightly tanned skin and dark brown hair. But what Naruto noticed right away was the similar facial structure the woman had to Colin, along with her blue eyes that were similar to the redhead's standing beside him. Except for the color of her skin and hair, Naruto was sure that he was looking at an older version of Colin, and most likely her mother. The only other exception was that the woman's eyes were duller than Colin's, and a fatigue that Naruto could clearly see had nothing to do with her physical state of being. Mistress, you're home, the woman spoke in a soft, relieved tone of voice. I'm so glad. I was starting to get worried. The look in her eyes as she stared at Colin showed honest care and concern. It was only then that the woman Naruto was there also. Oh, sorry, I didn't realize you had company. The way she said it was polite, but with the intense look that she sent him, Naruto was sure that she was looking for any sort of ill intentions towards Colin. I'm Naruto Uzumaki, it's nice to meet you. The blonde Uzumaki said, introducing himself. I'm a friend of Colin's from school. The brown-haired woman seemed to be surprised by Naruto's last name and the knowledge that he attended Ashford Academy along with Colin, but she still smiled kindly at him and gave him a small bow. It is a pleasure to meet you, thank you for escorting Mistress Colin home. No thanks are necessary, I was happy to do it. Naruto replied before turning towards Colin. I'll see you at school tomorrow, Colin. He said as he turned to leave. Yeah, good night, Colin answered softly. Maybe the next time we go out it can be just the two of us. Naruto called back as he got into the car. What? Colin sputtered confusedly in question, as a light blush spread across her face, though the question was left unheard as Naruto had already been driven away. Mistress Colin, I'm so happy that you are making friends at school. Ms. Kazuki said after she and Colin had entered the Statfeld home. Mr. Naruto seems nice. Is he just a good friend or something more perhaps? She asked, hoping to know Colin's relation to the blonde with whisker-like markings. That is none of your business. Colin snapped. For a moment the red-headed Statfeld heiress considered telling her mother about Naruto having known Naoto, but in the end decided against it. No point in bringing up something that would change nothing and only remind the woman of what she had lost. I'm going to my room, Colin stated evenly, as she walked past the woman without looking at her, a part of the half-Britannian. Regretting the way she spoke to her mother. Yes, mistress, Ms. Kazuki said in a submissive tone, doing her best not to let any of the pain she felt at the way Colin talked to her show on the surface. A few days later Shirley and Colin were in student council room setting up a cat house for Arthur. When the other members of the student council asked Naruto what they could get for Q, Naruto had replied that a comfortable bed would be enough to make the lazy fox happy. Q proceeded to try and claw out Naruto's face. Say, can I ask you something important? Shirley began her back towards the redhead, who was currently playing with both Arthur and Q. Huh, sure, what is it? Colin replied distractedly. Colin, are you hiding something from us? Shirley asked, if it's something too personal. No, what are you talking about? The redhead asked, paying closer attention to the orange-haired girl, as she pulled Arthur close and slowly reached into her skirt's pocket and pulled out a small pink hand purse. You can tell me, I promise not to be too shocked or upset. Shirley assured, well, the thing is, I happened to see you before. The yellow-green-eyed Ashford student revealed. At S. Hurley's statement, Colin hit a button on her purse that released a hidden blade, scaring Arthur and making Q look at her as if she were stupid, not that Colin noticed the kitsune's expression. Are you interested in going out with Lulu? Although it was a question, Shirley made it sound more like an accusation. Lulu, Colin repeated, completely taken back by the different direction that the conversation had taken from what she expected. The other day I saw you outside. Shirley told her, it looked like you two were about to kiss, or something. What? Colin nearly shouted, standing up from where she had been kneeling with Arthur in her arms held against her chest, while Q looked at the drama that was unfolding with amusement evident in her eyes. I thought we cleared this up the last time. And what about what Millie said before in the Namikaze Corp building? Colin questioned, trying her best to not outright shout at her female classmate. But you never answered me on who you wanted to get a kiss from then. Shirley shot back fiercely. And half the time Millie says things like that just to tease or embarrass someone. So is something going on between you and Lulu? You can tell me. Shirley said, desperately needing to know. It's nothing like that, Colin insisted. Then do you really like Naruto? The full Britannian student asked instead. While it wasn't what Shirley really wanted to know if Colin said that she did, then that would help ease some of the orange-haired girl's concerns when it came to Colin and Lelouch. Well, Colin started, only to trail off at the end. She wasn't completely sure how to answer that question. Colin was sure that she felt something for her fellow half-Britannian, but she wasn't sure what those feelings were. Though at the very least she knew that she did consider him a friend, admired him for everything he's done, and was attracted to him physically. Without meaning to, the memory of him in the shower came to the forefront of her mind. Besides that, there was also the thing that Naruto said the night he dropped her off, though he hadn't brought it up since then, and Colin wanted to know if he had been joking or if he had actually meant that he wanted to go out with her. She found that he didn't hate the idea of going out with the handsome blonde. To Shirley, Colin's inability to answer her question just made it more evident that the red-headed nightmare pilot was interested in her Lulu. In a royal transport carrier that was moving through the Tokyo settlement, Cornelia, along with Darlton, Guilford, and other Britannian soldiers, were looking over a map that showed the Saitama Ghetto and the nightmare frames that were moving into place. The Saitama Ghetto is now completely surrounded. The Yamato Alliance's hideout is located somewhere in here. Half the people in this neighborhood are cooperating with them. So if we proceed now, Darlton explained, turning away from the monitor to face the Viceroy of Area 11. What would be the effect on production? Cornelia questioned from her seat. Primary sector output should decrease by 0.2%. Darlton answered immediately. Within expectations, you mean? All right. Cornelia stated, her gaze shifting to stare at three men towards her left who were dressed similarly in gray clothes, standing next to one another with their right hands resting over their hearts. All of you here participated in the Shinjuku disaster, is that correct? She asked them. Yes, and we are indebted to you, Princess Cornelia, for your mercy. The man in the middle began. That's not what I'm asking. Cornelia said, cutting the man off fiercely, before turning her gaze back to the monitor. Do you think the conditions are similar to those in Shinjuku? The dark pink-haired princess continued with a smirk playing across her lips. Zero is a criminal with a flair for the theatrical. I've recreated the same conditions that existed in Shinjuku in order to draw him out. If he is the overconfident type, one predict that he will come here to try and kill me. The viceroy explained for the benefit of her subordinates. Viceroy, the man from before started. You would really risk your own life like this? He asked. Cornelia stared at the man with an uncaring disinterest. What you fail to understand is war is a struggle between pride and life. Cornelia said. But your majesty, what of Kurama? We had confirmed reports of his presence in Shinjuku and the appearance of an unknown nightmare frame that resembled a nine-tailed fox, that we can only assume was piloted by him. The same man tried to argue. Are you suggesting that we drop the operation simply because of one man? Cornelia asked threateningly. Of course not, Viceroy, the man said, immediately backtracking. Kurama is an unknown factor. Should he appear, then we simply capture him like we will Zero. Cornelia stated confidently. Back in Ashford, Suzaku was walking toward the club room, after he finished work for the day. Humming as he twirled something that he had picked up to tease Arthur with. He was almost to the council room when a voice that the brown-haired Japanese recognized spoke up from behind him. Well, someone seems happy. Naruto noted, walking up to Suzaku. Naruto, Suzaku greeted his friend with a smile. How are you? The blonde shinobi shrugged his shoulders. Can't complain. I just finished with some business and decided to come back here to hang out with everyone and pick up Q. Naruto replied. Is that so? I just got off work also. Suzaku said. I'm guessing Hat Nina is already at the Namikaze Corporation then. The green-eyed teen asked, as the two continued walking toward the council room together. Yeah, Naruto answered, she has been doing a great job and has been handling things well. All things considered. He stated. I see, that's good, Suzaku said, his smile growing just a bit wider. He had been informed of Nina's little phobia and made sure to give the dark-haired girl the room she needed so she needn't feel panicked by his presence. The two male teens had reached the council room's door just in time to hear shouting coming from the inside when the door opened, revealing Colin shouting at someone. Like I said, there is nothing between Lelouch and I. Colin shouted to the other occupant of the room, not realizing that Naruto and Suzaku were standing right there. If the gasp she let out when she saw them was anything to go by. There is nothing between Lelouch and you. Naruto repeated. I guess I should feel relieved then. The Cerulean-eyed former Jinchuriki said with a grin. Colin blushed slightly at what Naruto had just said, as she silently wondered how long he had been standing there and how much he had heard. If it had been just Suzaku, then she could have just brushed him off, since despite both of them being members of the student council, they had barely said a word to each other in the days they knew one another. Aside from a few pleasant greetings during the day. Lelouch? Suzaku questioned, slightly ignorant of what was going on, as he wondered what his childhood friend had anything to do with the situation. Peeking into the council room, he could see Shirley holding on Arthur in her arms, and it looked like she was on the verge of tears. It seemed his friend really was bad with women if he was the cause of making one cry without even having to be in the same room. It's nothing, Colin managed to get out, quelling the blush on her face until it disappeared, and then turned to address Shirley one last time. Anyway, that is how it is, she stated before walking away. Naruto watched Colin walk away, as he hummed thoughtfully for a second before following after the red-headed girl, leaving Suzaku to deal with the orange-haired one. Deciding it was best to start things with something simple, Suzaku asked Shirley a question he hoped would help calm the yellow-green-eyed girl. Where is Lelouch? I don't know where he is and I don't give a damn. Shirley snapped at him, the tears at the corner of her eyes threatening to spill over. As Suzaku looked at the girl that seemed seconds away from breaking down, he silently cursed his friend for leaving him to deal with the emotional girl on his own. Off to the side, Q did her best not to draw attention to herself by bursting out laughing, as she watched the spectacle that was playing out before her. It didn't take long for Naruto to catch up with Colin, though the redhead seemed reluctant to talk with the blonde about what had happened. He so wanted to ask about the women that he met the other night, but he was sure that was something else that Colin didn't want to talk with him about. It was nothing, Colin eventually said, breaking the silence that was between them. What was? Naruto asked. Thought the answer was obvious. That thing back there. What Shirley was saying about me and Lelouch, it's nothing, there is nothing going on between us. She was just being paranoid, or something. Colin told him. She wasn't sure why she was explaining herself to him, she really didn't have to. Colin just knew that she didn't want him to misunderstand anything. You don't have to explain anything to me. Naruto replied, giving the red-haired girl a smile. Besides, I believe you, he added at the end. Colin was momentarily surprised by his steadfast belief in her. Though the smile she returned to him showed how much she appreciated it. I know, but still, she began, only to trail off at the end, still not sure how to express what she was feeling. Instead of stressing on putting words to what she was feeling, Colin decided it was best to change the subject, and this was the best chance she had to talk about what she had been wondering about for the last few days. Naruto. Colin began tentatively. Never mind, Colin murmured, deciding not to continue with her question at the last second, her confidence wavering at the last second, stopping her from asking what she wanted in regards to his comment from the other night. Colin wasn't sure how she'd react to the answer he would give her at the moment. Naruto looked at her questioningly and was about to press the issue to see what was on her mind when his cell phone went off. Hello, Arya. How did you get this number? The blonde shinobi asked after answering his phone. Colin instantly stiffened slightly at mention of the pretty brunette, as she stared at Naruto intently and listened carefully to what was said. What was that? Okay, thanks, Naruto said, finishing the short phone call. What was that about? Colin asked, doing her best to not sound interested, but not quite managing it. Arya called to tell me about some news that is being broadcasted that she was sure I'd be interested in. Naruto explained, looking for the broadcast on his phone and quickly finding it. Military authorities reported that they have surrounded the Saitama ghetto, a known hiding place for terrorists. Viceroy Cornelia is also on the scene and entry to that area is strictly restricted. The female newscaster reported, it appears that a full-scale assault will be launched in 2 hours. After the reporter finished saying that, Naruto cut the feed to his cell and putting it in his pocket. Damn, so that's what she meant. Naruto muttered grimly to himself. What? Colin asked, her fists clenched in anger at the news. Who are you talking about? I haven't told you or any of the others who I meet with when Suzaku first joined the student council, did I? Naruto asked her, though it was more of a rhetorical question. My meeting was with Princess Cornelia. The cerulean-eyed pilot revealed, Colin's eyes widening in surprise at the information she was given. To make a long story short, at the end of our meeting she told me that the Namikaze Corporation would be able to help rebuild another of the ghettos in a few days. I guess this is what she meant. He finished with a clear frown on his face before letting out a sigh. And here I thought I was done with work for the day. Naruto mused humorlessly, as he said a quick goodbye to Colin before return in to the council room to pick up Q so that they could go. As Colin watched the blonde leave, a part of her was desperately trying to figure out what it is she, or the other members of the resistance, could do to help those in the Saitama ghetto. But going there with Cornelia surrounding the area would make it nearly impossible to get in, and all but suicidal if they somehow managed to get in. No other feasible alternative. Colin had no choice but to wait for new information to arrive about what was happening. Back in the clubroom, Q was highly disappointed in the turn of events. After Naruto had left, Suzaku had done his best to comfort the distraught Shirley and eventually got her to tell him about her apparent feelings for Lelouch. Suzaku tried to help by calling using the club P. Hone and ask him what his thoughts and feelings on Shirley were, only for said orange-haired girl to snatch the phone out of his hand not even a second later and ended the call. What followed was a quick game of tug-of-war with the phone, resulting in Suzaku following on top of Shirley, their faces inches apart from one another, both of them with a healthy blush on their cheeks. The cause for Q's displeasure was the fact that after being in the same position for nearly an entire minute, neither had done a single thing about it. She had even gone through the trouble of restraining Arthur so he wouldn't interfere with what was happening and ruin her fun by attacking Suzaku, like the felines seemed fond of doing. But they didn't move closer to close the small gap between them with a kiss, and they didn't jump away from each other in embarrassment. They just looked into each other's eyes, Yellow-green meeting forest green, unable to break eye contact with one another. Am I interrupting something? Naruto asked from the doorway when he entered the room and noticed Suzaku and Shirley's compromising position. The sound of the blonde's voice seemed to break whatever trance Shirley and Suzaku were in because they immediately scrambled to get away from one another, the blushes on their faces darkening just the slightest bit at being discovered by someone in such a position. No, Suzaku saw it, not even looking in Naruto's direction. Not at all, Shirley added, keeping herself busy by unnecessarily straightening out her clothes. Neither of the Japanese or Britannian students could look in the other's direction as well, as they did their best to avoid eye contact with one another. Okay, Naruto said, not too sure what was going on with them. From the corner of his eye he could see Q pouting. Or at least the fox equivalent of a pout. Something has come up and I will have to go. I just came to get Q. The whisker-marked shinobi said, Q making her way towards him and jumping onto his shoulder. It's nothing serious, is it? Suzaku asked him once he managed to regain some sense of self-control. Probably, Naruto answered honestly. But nothing I shouldn't be able to handle. The blonde teen reassured them. I'll see you guys tomorrow. He finished as he turned to leave. So what was happening between those two? Naruto asked Q through their telepathic link. Nothing, Q replied with a huff, absolutely nothing. Damn Ninjin ruining her fun by freezing up like that. With Naruto gone, Suzaku and Shirley were left alone in the club room in an awkward silence. So, Suzaku began, slightly uncomfortable and unsure about what to say, as he avoided looking at Shirley. So, Shirley repeated, just uncomfortable as Suzaku, and also refusing to look at him. Lelouch sat in his placing the military uniform he acquired last time in the Shinjuku ghetto in a suitcase while CC laid down on his bed. Not too long ago he had about Cornelia's plans for the Saitama ghetto and it was obviously ruse to draw his attention and make him show up. Even knowing that it was a trap, Lelouch was confident in his ability to outwit Cornelia and turn things in his favor. Besides, it gave him the perfect opportunity to get close to Cornelia in order to get answers about his mother's murderer and then kill the dark pink-haired viceroy afterwards. His attention was so focused on the GOAL ahead he even ignored the call that came from the student council room. CC couldn't understand, not that she tried really hard to, Lelouch's motivations. He claimed that the need to find the truth behind his mother's murder was just as important as destroying Britannia, yet he was risking his life for one of those goals against an opponent he was most likely going to lose against, despite what he believed his capabilities might be. And as long as Lelouch needed to fill his end of their contract, CC would not allow him die or throw his life away. If that's true, then what happens to Nunnally? Should I simply give up on my sister because she is frail? I refuse to accept that. Lelouch stated, slamming the suitcase close and standing up. I'll wipe out that sort of world myself, he declared determinedly. It was noble. To an extent, CC decided that Lelouch would go to such extremes that he was even willing to change the world itself for his sister, but Lelouch was hardly the first person she met with the same sorts of convictions, and they had all died during the process of changing the world and its ideals. Getting up from the bed, CC moved to stand in front of the door, cutting Lelouch off and keeping him in the room, with a gun trained on the black-haired Britannian youth. You can't go, Lelouch. You need to fulfill your part of our bargain, so I won't have you dying before that. CC stated with very little emotion in her voice. Notice what you are saying and what you are doing are contradictory, Lelouch pointed out, keeping a calm demeanor. Oh, I won't kill you. I'm merely going to shoot you in the leg to quiet you down. CC replied evenly, the gun not wavering from where it was being pointed for even a second. Now I get it, the black-haired Britannian said with a confident smirk. You are unable to use Gios yourself, aren't you? Lelouch asked, though it could also be considered a statement, and from the small gasp CC let out and by the NY change in her facial expression he was right. I'm not surprised, I suspected as much. You obviously wouldn't have asked me to do it if you could have done it yourself. He finished as he pulled out a gun of his own and pointed it at CC. Do you honestly think you can threaten me with a gun? CC asked, completely unconcerned about the gun in Lelouch's hand, perks of being an immortal. Yes, I do. Lelouch replied with the same confident smirk as before, as he moved the gun so its barrel was now aimed at his head. Until I met you I was dead, an impudent corpse existing behind a false guise of life. A life in which I did nothing real. Day to day I merely went through the motions of living as if I were a zombie, and I always had the feeling of gradually dying. If I am condemned to go back to that, then I'd rather." He finished, threatening to pull the trigger. Staring directly into Cece's golden-colored eyes, Lelouch's confidence was unfaltering as he was sure that his bluff would pay off. If he was right about Cece, then she wouldn't do anything that'd risk his life for the sake of fulfilling their deal, so Lelouch was confident that she'd yield and let him leave. "Stop it, Cece, show UTED," showing the first signs of actual emotions since Lelouch met the light green-haired girl, as she let her arm drop to her side with Lelouch doing the same. "I see now it is life without meaning in a life like that." She finished, looking down at the floor with a saddened smile on her face, before turning her gaze back to Lelouch, her expression back to its normal apathetic self. "Fine, if you feel that strongly about it, then I won't stop you." Lelouch was pleased with himself at being able to read the situation so perfectly, and with his only obstacle cleared, Lelouch walked past Cece and out of the room. With Cece by herself, she laid back on the bed and stared up at the ceiling. She had no doubt that Lelouch would lose control of the situation and need help. He might be an exceptional strategist, but he still had no, or at the least very little, experience when it came to actual combat and the unpredictability of the human nature. Besides that, there was something that had caught her attention and she wanted to see it for herself, and Cece was sure that she would if she went to the Saitama ghetto. The 2-hour deadline was drawing to a close on the Saitama ghetto, and already the Britannian military had the entire area surrounded, as they waited for their orders to begin the attack. The few Japanese people that lived in the ghetto were terrified of what was happening as they were rounded up. The sound of gunfire could already be heard in the distance, and what exactly that meant was not lost to any of them, as they already knew what their fate would be. From within the royal transport carrier, Cornelia watched as the last few soldiers moved into place on the monitor. "We are done sweeping away those in charge," Darlton reported, glancing back at the viceroy. "It's nearly time to set our plan into motion. So shall we begin?" Cornelia asked, though everyone knew that it was a rhetorical question. "Right," Darlton replied, once more facing the monitor. "Attention all forces. Commence eradication of the Saitama ghetto." The proud Britannian general ordered over the speaker system. With that one order, hell was unleashed on the devastated Japanese city, as foot soldiers, tanks, planes, and Sutherland Nightmare frames stormed into the Saitama ghetto, killing every citizen that they came across. Lelouch had managed to sneak into the ghetto earlier, and he now watched the ensuing chaos with a clear glare. As he noted that no matter whom it was that was in charge, things didn't change when it came to how Britannia did things. Lelouch was brought out of his thoughts when a Sutherland came up behind him. But he was completely unconcerned. He already had a plan to acquire the Sutherland for himself. In another part of the Saitama ghetto, Naruto stood, in his complete Kurama disguise. With his eyes closed, listening the sound of gunfire and the terrified screams of the Japanese people before they were forever silenced. It didn't matter if they were man, woman, or child, they were shown no mercy. Snapping his eyes open, Naruto revealed his Sharingan eye, the tome spinning rapidly, and a couple of seconds later about 50 shadow clones came into existence. "You know what to do," Kurama began. "Protect and escort the civilians to safety," he finished, slashing his left arm out in front of him, dismissing his clones so they can carry out his orders, as they all disappeared in a blur of speed. From the wrist of the hand that was still held out in front of him hung a red crystal similar to the one given to him by Tsunade all those years ago. "My turn," Kurama muttered to himself. As he pushed chakra into the crystal, and in a flash of red light the Kyuubi Nightmare frame appeared in its fox mode. Naruto had applied a seal to the crystal, which acted like a summoning jutsu. It wasn't like putting it in a storage scroll, as Naruto didn't seal the Kitsune Nightmare away into the crystal, but actually summoned it like he would summon toads. The blonde shinobi altered the seal just a little bit, so instead of appearing in a puff of a smoke, the Kyuubi would appear in a flash of crimson light, and the same would happen when it was unsummoned and returned to where it was stored in his private warehouse, mostly because Naruto thought it would look cooler than a puff of smoke. Jumping into the cockpit, Naruto activated the Fox Nightmare and, unlike in the battle in Shinjuku, the IFF system, which would allow him to be clearly detected by others. After all, it was the best and easiest way to draw as many enemy soldiers to him as possible. In the transport carrier, Cornelia watched as her forces were slowly overtaken by the terrorists that were hiding in the Saitama ghetto by using stolen Sutherlands in the last several minutes. But despite all his Cornelia was far from worried. Everything was going according to how she planned, and in a few minutes she would be able to proceed with the next phase of her plan. Exactly like Shinjuku. The soldier that stood in the middle of the three that Cornelia granted leniency to remarked uselessly. "Has there been any sign of Zero yet?" Another of the soldiers asked, but before anyone could answer his question, a new icon appeared on the monitor that registered itself as an enemy nightmare frame. The image's sudden appearance instantly caught Cornelia's attention, along with everyone else's. So far, all nightmare frames used by what was assumed to be Zero's forces were stolen Sutherlands, so the sudden appearance of this new nightmare frame caught everyone by surprise. Report. What information can we gather about this new enemy nightmare? The indigo-eyed princess commanded. Milady, the nightmare is not registering in any of our databases of known nightmare frames. As it stands, the information we have is the name that it is displaying under, Kyubi. Darlton said. A custom nightmare then, Cornelia murmured to herself, an indignant look appearing in her eye at the knowledge. As she watched some of the Sutherlands under her command approaching the area that the Kyubi was located at. Very well, I want an image of this thing immediately. The second those Sutherlands if it turns out to be the nightmare that Kurama is suspected of piloting, then have them engage it in combat, and capture it and its pilot. Cornelia relayed her orders. Your Majesty, we are receiving reports on multiple sightings of the masked figure Kurama throughout the Saitama ghetto. A nameless soldier in the room spoke up, bringing up multiple pictures of Kurama taken by Britannian soldiers. All within minutes if not seconds of each other. How is that possible? One of the three similarly dressed Britannian soldiers questioned, his gaze shifting from picture to picture and the entire Kurama look-alikes. Though no one bothered to answer him. He and his companions were only there because Princess Cornelia allowed them to be there. Cornelia looked at the images, her gaze calculative and piercing as she tried to make sense of what she saw. Could Mr. Namikaze have been right and Kurama's abilities are a result of some performance-enhancing suit, then all these individuals are most likely his underlings. Cornelia thought, the frown on her face deepening in displeasure. Viceroy, I have new intel. Another soldier shouted urgently. Well, what is it? Cornelia demanded impatiently. One of the Sutherland pilots was able to land a hit on one of the masked figures, only for figure to go up in a cloud smoke. The pilot was just barely able to transmit the information before his Sutherland was listed as being destroyed. The Britannian soldier said at once, not wanting to displease his princess and risk suffering her wrath. Cornelia tried to make sense of this new information. Did that mean that all the copies were some type of illusion? Were they all just fakes? But that couldn't be possible because the copies were attacking and affecting, actually destroying the nightmare frames they came across. Along with anything else they came across. For now we have to focus our attention on the unknown nightmare. Keep track of the reports in case something else comes up. But it is most likely that the original Kurama is piloting the nightmare. If we capture him, then we'll have answers as to how he is able to fight nightmare frames, and what exactly those copies are. The dark pink-haired second Britannian princess instructed. Yes, Your Majesty. All the soldiers under her command answered in perfect unison. Lelouch had also noticed the unknown unit that appeared on the IFF system monitor. And was trying to decide what the best course of action to take was. It didn't appear that the new nightmare frame was aligned with the Britannian forces, but that could just be rused by Cornelia to draw him out. Another possibility is that Kurama had once more appeared like he did on the bridge, and how he supposedly did in Shinjuku. Either way, the appearance of the unknown nightmare was completely unexpected and unsolicited, as it added an independent variable that changed how he was sure Cornelia's forces would react. P4, move 100 meters southeast of your current position and do recognizance on the new unit. Lelouch instructed to one of the resistance members that lived in the Saitama ghetto through a walkie-talkie, stay out of sight and avoid confrontation at all costs. Simply observe the proceedings and how the nightmare reacts to the Britannian Sutherlands. The black-haired Britannian finished transmitting the last of his commands, getting an AF. Affirmative from the Yamato Alliance member. Kurama watched steadily as 4 Sutherlands approached his position from straight in front of him. By order of Viceroy Cornelia, you are to surrender at once. The voice of one of the Sutherland pilots came over his speaker system. Refuse and we will open fire. In a matter of seconds, Kyuubi stood behind the 4 unmoving Sutherlands in its human mode, its 9, now bladed tails swinging behind haphazardly yet at the same time gracefully. The 4 pilots frozen in place were unable to move. 1 second the fox-like nightmare frame was right in front of them. And the next it stood behind them transformed. Before they could do anything, the Sutherlands registered the fact that they had taken excessive damage and activated their automated ejection system. Just as the pilots were ejected, the 4 Britannian military nightmare frames fell apart, their heads, arms, and legs cut off from the main body. In Cornelia's transport, everyone watched as the monitor showed the Sutherlands that had reached the enemy unit first were displayed as being destroyed. What was so surprising about this was the fact that they had all been destroyed almost simultaneously of one another. While the less important soldiers were trying to make sense of what happened, Cornelia, Guilford, and Darlton were more focused on the speed that the Kyuubi had managed to display. Viceroy Cornelia, we were able to receive some images from one of the Sutherlands before it was destroyed. One of the soldiers reported. Put them on the monitor. Cornelia ordered at once. NTS later a sequence of pictures appeared showing Kyuubi as it slowly shifted from its fox mode to its human mode before the tails destroyed the Sutherlands. What now, Princess? Guilford asked. Send in a few more troops. Let's see what exactly our friend here is capable of. Cornelia said, a hard gleam in her eyes, as her instructions were quickly followed out. Make sure that there is an active video feed of the conflict being transmitted. The Yamato Alliance member that Lelouch had sent out under the name P4 watched what happened to the enemy Sutherlands with his mouth agape in astonishment. Not only was he amazed by how quickly the Crimson Knightmare took out its 4 enemies, but also because of what it looked like before it attacked. That nightmare frame, it looks like the Kyuubi no Kitsune. He muttered out loud. Kyuubi no Kitsune. Lelouch wondered, being able to hear what the man said through the communicator that was still on. Then he noticed how the Alliance member was moving toward the mysterious nightmare. P4, what are you doing? I told you to stay back. Hey, come on, man. The resistance fighter replied, dismissing Lelouch's worry. This guy just destroyed 4 enemy nightmares. There is nothing to worry about. The resistance captured Sutherland made its way toward the Kyuubi, but before the Japanese resistance member could offer a greeting, Kyuubi fired. One of the Harkins mounted on its arms, almost impaling the Sutherland's head, as a warning shot. Hey, what are you doing? We are on the same side. P4 shouted at Kurama, if a nightmare could stumble backwards, this one would have. I don't know that. Kurama replied offhandedly, all I know is that you are piloting a Sutherland and could be acting like you're not part of the Britannian military. I'm not, the man replied. Ignoring Lelouch's orders to pull back, opening the cockpit to his stolen nightmare and stood up in clear view. See. He finished, referring to his lack of uniform. And clear signs of his heritage being Japanese. The next moment the Japanese man had one of Kyuubi's clawed hands inches away from his face, the wind blowing his hair back. Idiot, Kurama muttered. What are doing? P4 demanded fearfully, barely keeping himself from falling over, and off the Sutherland, from the shock. In a battle you don't want to expose yourself like that. It could get you killed. Kurama lectured before noticing the approaching enemy units, at least 10 of them. Now leave, I don't need you serving as a distraction for when the enemy arrives. He stated evenly. What? I don't have to listen to you. The man replied, his fear turning to anger at being so quickly dismissed. I'm not giving you much of a choice. Kurama told him, having 2 of Kyuubi's tails cut off the stolen Sutherland's arms off. Now leave. Damn it, the man growled, closing the cockpit's hatching and re-entering his Sutherland. He didn't have any other choice but to run now. Well, it was that or let himself be killed. Lelouch, who could see the Britannian Sutherlands, what he figured was Kurama's position, was relieved. Good, while Kurama acts as a distraction I can continue with my plan. He thought to himself before he continued to give out his orders to the remaining Japanese rebels. The instant that Kyuubi came into the enemy Sutherlands, they opened fire, only for every shot to be blocked. They tried to overwhelm the Fox Knightmare by surrounding it and continuing their onslaught in the hope of getting a lucky shot through the Crimson Knightmare's automated defense. Sadly for them, none of them came close to piercing the Kyuubi's defenses, and with each bullet deflected they came all that much closer to being sent back to their source. Seeing this, two of the Sutherlands tried to move in closer, while doing their best to dodge the bullets that were redirected back at them, only to suffer minor damage each time. The first Sutherland, once the pilot thought they were close enough, fired its Harken, hoping that it would successfully get past the tails. The pilot's hopes were quickly dashed when one of Kyuubi's 9 tails blocked the Hark. And while another cut the cable it was attached to, making it useless. The pilot didn't have enough time to lament about this, because a second later Kyuubi stood in front of him, a swirling ball of destruction in its hand. Rasengan! Kurama shouted over the Kyuubi's speakers before slamming the ball into Sutherland's torso and making its back blow out. Everyone stared in shock before the second RLAND pilot that approached the Crimson Fox Knightmare let out a scream of fury and charged at the Kyuubi recklessly, while activating its arm blade and swinging it at the 9-tailed Nightmare frame. Before it could connect though, Kyuubi's clawed hands grabbed the mechanical arm, its claws digging into the arm, before ripping it off completely and impaling the Sutherland with one of its bladed tails. Spinning around, the Kyuubi swung the impaled Sutherland and let it crash into another Sutherland, bringing the total number of opponents from 10 to 7. In an act of desperation, the remaining units once more opened fire. But like last time, all the bullets were being deflected, this time though they were returned only inches away from where they had originally been shot from. Instead of staying still like before, Kurama had the Kyuubi rush forward towards the closest enemy Nightmare, shifting it back into its fox mode as he went, moving faster than before as its claws dug into the Sutherland effortlessly. The Britannian soldier ejecting from Nightmare frame due to sheer panic. 4 Sutherlands rushed the Fox Knightmare, moving to surround it on all 4 sides, trying to take it on in CL's quarter combat, only for all 4 of them to be impaled at once by one of Kyuubi's tails. Shifting it back into its human mode, Kurama made Kyuubi spin around, quickly shredding all 4 Sutherlands with all of its tails. At the same time, the bridge leading into the Saitama ghetto suddenly had many explosions going off its entire length, taking a good amount of Britannian forces along with it. "That's enough," Cornelia said from within her carrier. "Order all troops to fall back. Further damage and casualties serve no point, and from the looks of it we've acquired all the information from this Kyuubi as we can at the moment. There is no point in having those last 2 Sutherlands engage it in combat," she finished, as the 3 soldiers she had given a second chance to moving to stand in front of her in protest. "Fall back. With all due respect, we can still fight them. We can't fight them like this," Cornelia replied evenly, not even bothering to spare them a look, as Darlton did as she ordered. "What, no stomach for it?" Lelouch asked out loud to no one in particular, having tapped into the Britannian military communications system and heard the order that was just given to have all forces retreat behind perimeter lines. "If I blend in with the retreating units, that will put me right next to Cornelia. Have I cleared the task at hand already? It seems everything went according to my plan. Even Kurama's interference proved to be a benefit in my favor," the black-haired Britannian prince thought with a smirk before he moved his Sutherland to meet up with the other retreating forces. "Cornelia, you are no match, you'll lose," the violet-eyed teen thought confidently. "Zero is no match, I'll win," Cornelia said, unknowingly matching her half-brother in the amount of confidence their voices carried. And she should be confident, she was the goddess of victory after all. She was also sure that Zero was close by, most likely in one of the Sutherlands that she had called back. Now all that was left was to take care of Kurama. "Shall we go then, Guilford my knight?" she asked, looking toward her side at her personal knight. "It is my pleasure to serve and obey you, my lady," Guilford answered, bowing to the indigo-eyed viceroy before stepping out of the room. Lelouch sat calmly within his stolen Sutherland with a smirk still on his face. He was already so close to Cornelia. But with the security surrounding her at the moment, it would be impossible to get to her, even with his Gios. Luckily he already had a pawn acting as a decoy and distraction, even if he didn't know it. As proven evident when he saw the Gloucesters of Cornelia's personal guard. "I'd almost think you were desperate, Cornelia, the way you were using your personal guard, if I didn't agree that the opponent they will be facing was worth it," Lelouch thought to himself, knowing that they were heading towards where the nightmare frame Kyuubi was located. Just in case, I think I'll give you another target to focus on. Lelouch continued speaking out loud before contacting one of the terrorists. This is 0. N1 will re-engage their IFF signal, operate as a Britannian unit, he finished. Understood. A man's voice replied over the communicator. In the Royal Transport Carrier, Cornelia's subordinates were trying to form up a rescue party for the Sutherland that been captured by the enemy. Send more Gloucesters and destroy it. Cornelia said in a cool, unconcerned voice. You can't, a soldier protested, he might be a captive of the enemy. I ordered all troops to fall back. I have no E for soldiers that can't follow my orders. The Viceroy of Area 11 stated. And at the moment our biggest concern is dealing with the Kyuubi Knightmare and its pilot. You heard the princess. Darlton said sternly. Do your duty even if it costs you your life. My subordinates follow that code without question. Cornelia informed them. Guilford, I'll be leaving the battle with Kurama in your hands. The princess told her knight, choosing instead to focus on the lone Sutherland that was transmitting an IFF signal. I will not fail you, princes. Guilford replied. With Naruto, the blonde watched D.'s interestedly as 3 nightmare frames, which he was able to identify as Gloucesters, quickly approached his position. He noticed that one of them was a deeper shade of purple than the other two, ND, with each one of them carrying a large yellow spear and wearing a cape. The Gloucester pilots didn't even try to establish a line of communications like the Sutherland pilots did and went straight for the offensive. The darker-colored Nightmare lead the charge with the other 2 following close behind it, each one of them with their spear ready. Kurama had Kyuubi dodge the spears that were thrust in his direction, and retaliated with having 3 of his Nightmare's dark red-bladed tails strike at them. The 3 Gloucesters moved out of the way of the tails, with the dark purple one dodging completely. While the dull purple Gloucesters had their sides and shoulders slightly cut into, barely being able to keep themselves from receiving more serious damage. The Gloucester piloted by Guilford once more charged at Kurama, only to jump above the Nightmare and land smoothly on its other side. Kurama kept his sights on the dark purple 5th generation Nightmare frame, already recognizing it as the biggest threat. As he turned his Nightmare to face it and seemingly ignored the other 2 Gloucesters. Guilford raised the spear that his Gloucester held and thrust it towards Kyuubi, only to watch in surprise as the fox-like machine grabbed onto his spear and pivoted over it, kicking at the 2 dull purple Gloucesters that had tried to sneak up behind the Kyuubi and continue its arc, inging down its legs and tails at Guilford. The long black-haired Britannian moved out of the way, forcibly taking his spear with him as Kyuubi still had a strong grasp on the spear's tip, causing Ks to fly as it was pulled out of the grip of the Nightmare's chakra-infused claws. Continuing with his attack, Kurama had Kyuubi spin around, to face the other 2 Gloucesters of the unnamed pilots, and raising its arms, channeling his wind chakra into them, and fired the Kitsune Nightmares / Harkins with wind chakra running through them. The Gloucesters raised their spears to block the incoming / Harkins, only to watch in disbelief as the / Harkins easily sliced through the spears and continued their course towards them. It was only their experiences as pilots that had them move out of the way in time to keep themselves from being killed, though one had its arm heavily damaged and the other lost it completely. Both of you pull back and provide support from afar, Guilford told the 2 pilots that were with him. The 2 extra Gloucesters immediately backed away, far enough not to get in the way but close enough that they could help if it was needed. Once his subordinates were a safe enough distance away, Guilford turned his attention toward Kurama. I must admit that you are a much better pilot than I had expected, but you cannot win. Who says I've been trying to win? Kurama replied. What? Guilford gasped. Let me show you exactly what I'm capable of when I am trying. Kurama roared, pushing the Crimson Knightmare to perform to its best capabilities. Guilford brought up his spear to help block the clawed swipe of Kyuubi's hand, the spear being damaged further but still functional. The black-haired Britannian didn't have the time to wonder how it was possible for Kyuubi's claws to cause his spear damage, because he had to instantly get out of the way of the follow-up strikes from Kyuubi's blades. The bladed tails had a much easier time cutting into Guilford's Gloucester despite the man's excellent piloting. And they should, since Naruto made them to be high-frequency blades that performed better than Kyuubi's chakra-infused claws, though not as Good as when Naruto infused the claws with wind chakra. The extra 2 Gloucester pilots did what they were supposed to by firing the machine guns that were mounted on their Knightmare's torso. Though the bullets were reflected, the pilots made sure to be positioned in a place where Kyuubi couldn't reflect them at Guilford. Moving in close, Guilford thrust his spear forward one more time, extending the prongs that were on the spear as he went. Shifting into Kyuubi's fox mode, Kurama dodged under the spear and charged forward, just as quickly turning back to its human form, once he was inside Guilford's defense. With the blonde pilot channeling wind chakra into its claws. Slashing upwards, Kyuubi's claws cut severely into the Gloucester's torso, but not enough to hurt the pilot inside. In his cockpit, Guilford stared wide-eyed as his system froze, a single thought in his mind: impossible. Sir, the 2 pilots shouted from within their nightmares, as they rushed toward their helpless superior. I think I've done enough for now. Kurama mused to himself, hitting a switch and activating a smoke screen. When the smoke eventually cleared, the Kyuubi Knightmare frame, and its IFF signal, had disappeared, leaving just the 3 damaged Gloucesters. Lelouch was shaking in his Sutherland in pure unadulterated rage, along with some shock. Everything had started off going exactly how he expected, his plans turning out perfectly. Even Kurama's appearance hadn't affected his goals and had made things easier for him. But now everything was ruined. The terrorists he convinced to fight for IM had all failed and Kurama had disappeared. Beaten this easily, but that's not how the game is supposed to go. Lelouch muttered to himself, clutching his phone in his hand, hearing his last piece be destroyed by the enemy. This is what real organization can do. He realized. Mission complete. All forces take formation number 4. A female voice announced over the PA system. This didn't work out like it did in Shinjuku. 0. Cornelia declared with a smug smirk. So are you still masquerading as one of us? We'll discover who you are shortly. The dark pink-haired princess continued. Attention all Nightmare pilots, open your hatches and reveal your faces. I repeat, all pilots, open your hatches and show me your faces. She finished relaying her instructions to the remaining Sutherland pilots, which included Lelouch. Cornelia. Lelouch snarled, being able to clearly imagine his half-sister's smug face at her apparent victory. He couldn't let his face be seen because that would instantly reveal that he was an imposter, but Lelouch couldn't think of anything that would actually allow him to escape without being instantly attacked by the gathered soldiers and their nightmares. Not even his Gios would prove useful in this situation. It wasn't long before it was Lelouch's turn to open his hatch. Zero's been sighted. That announcement had shocked Lelouch more than anything else that day. But he could clearly see it for himself. There, standing on top of a destroyed building, was Zero, drawing everyone's attention in an instant, and giving Lelouch the chance to escape. A chance he wasn't going to hesitate to take. Abandoning his stolen Sutherland, Lelouch quickly made his way into the sewers, so that he could escape. He hated the concept of running away almost as much as the act itself. By running away, he admitted his defeat at Cornelia's hands and his incapability to face her in battle. The banished prince suddenly came to a stop when he saw the person wearing the guise of Zero standing in front of him. Why did you rescue me? Lelouch asked, already having a good idea of who was standing in front of him. That's why he wasn't even mildly surprised when the person took off the mask to reveal long light green hair and golden-colored eyes. I told you already. CC began, flipping her hair over her shoulder. I can't have you dying. I wouldn't have lost if the conditions were equal. Lelouch claimed angrily. You sore loser, CC replied tauntingly, turning her back on him and tossing the helmet-like mask up and down. If you're really that good, you should be able to set up the conditions the way you want. The immortal stated. That's what I'll do then, I'll set them up. Lelouch declared just as CC looked back in his direction, but not necessarily at him. I'll raise an army that can't lose to Britannia, a people, a nation. Do you really think it is that easy? A voice asked from behind the black-haired Britannian teen, causing him to spin around and face a still disguised Naruto, and the person that had CC attention, with wide eyes. Hello, Zero. Kurama said, looking straight at Lelouch with his Sharingan eyes. What? I'm not. Lelouch started trying to act innocent. Don't bother denying it. Kurama cut him off. I've known your identity since the incident on the bridge. Lelouch scowled at the news. There were only 2 things he could do in this situation. Hope he could convince Kurama to work with him so he'd keep his secret or use his Geass on him. The choice was really quite easy since no matter what Lelouch couldn't risk his secret identity getting out. Plus this offered an opportunity that he couldn't waste. Activating his Geass, Lelouch stared directly at Kurama. "I hereby order you to do whatever I say," he announced loudly, his voice reverberating off the walls. The three people stood still for a moment, no one saying anything, Lelouch waiting to see if his Geass worked, as he usually received some sort of confirmation from his target, while CC just looked on curiously. Just as a smirk started to appear on Lelouch's face, he was suddenly hit in the face with a banana cream pie, followed by him hearing laughter coming from Kurama. "There is nothing like the classics," Kurama said, still laughing. CC couldn't help but agree as she did her best to stifle her own giggles. "What? How is this possible?" Lelouch demanded furiously, wiping away the pie that was on his face. "Why didn't my Geass work on you?" "Geass, is that what you call that ability of yours?" Kurama asked with a shrug of his shoulder. Showing he didn't care about the answer one way or another, while Lelouch frowned a bit at giving away that piece of information, although it wasn't all that important if he only knew the name. "Anyway, as to why it didn't work on me, well, that's a secret." The blonde mask-wearing teen finished with fox grin that went well with his mask. Lelouch seethed at the answer. Not only did his Geass not work on the blonde, but he didn't even know why that was. CC on the other hand had a small smile on her face at the irritation Kurama was causing Lelouch. But she was also curious why Lelouch's Geass had no effect. She could see that the fox mask-wearing individual was being honest when he asked about what Geass was called, so she knew that he had never heard about it before. That still left the question about Geass not having an effect on him, and at the moment her best guess to what the answer might be were his unique-looking eyes. A part of her wondered if she had met him back then, with his ability to ignore the power of a person's Geass, then would things have turned out differently. Before Lelouch could say anything else, Kurama appeared right in front of him, their faces close enough to one another that Lelouch could see the spinning tomes of Naruto's Sharingan. "Sleep," Kurama commanded in a soft yet firm tone. Lelouch did his best to stay awake and ignore the order, but he feel his strength quickly leaving him as his eyelids became heavy, and in no time whatsoever he was falling over unconscious, only being kept from meeting the hard cold ground because Kurama GHT him and set him down against the wall. "Well, I guess that my Sharingan still works on him," Kurama mused out loud, perfectly aware that the green-haired girl, that he still didn't know the name of, could hear him before turning toward her. CC had her gaze focused completely on him, trying to understand the person in front of her. She had been alive for a very long time, and for the first time in just as long she has finally found someone that proved to be a mystery to her, and she was curious. Kurama wasn't the first person she's met that wasn't affected by Geass, but CC knew that Kurama didn't fall under the conditions necessary for him not to be influenced in that regard. Then there were his abilities. CC had never seen them before, and she wanted to know more about them. "Sharingan," CC began curiously. "Is that what's affecting me and keeping me from figuring out your secret identity?" she asked, and from the way he stiffened visibly she was right. "Don't worry, it's working just fine. I have no idea of who you are," CC assured him, hoping to get some answers. "I'm surprised you can tell that the genjutsu is affecting you at all," Kurama told her honestly. "It should keep you from realizing anything is going on at all." Genjutsu, CC mumbled the word to herself. The word was Japanese and translated into something like illusionary technique, but that's all she could get about it. As she had never come across something like it before, simply another question without an answer. "If it works like I believe it does, then I'm the only one who will notice its effects. Though like I said before, just because I know it's there doesn't help me recognize who you are." "And why exactly is it that you can tell and no one else can?" Kurama asked. "Now that is my secret," CC replied with an amused smirk. "Is that so?" Kurama said with an amused smile of his own. "You know, we've been talking for the last few minutes and I still don't know what your name is," he pointed out. "You can call me CC," the golden yellow-eyed girl said. "And I suppose I should call you Kurama," she stated more than asked, and getting a nod in reply. "I guess, I'll see you another time, CC," Kurama said. as he turned around and started to leave. So what do you think of her, Amami? Naruto asked his partner that was within the seal, having chosen to come along with Naruto this time. The inside of the seal had changed from its sewer-like appearance to an exact replica of the two-dimension Hopper's apartment, so that Amami could be in the copy her room whenever she was in the seal. She's different from anyone else we've met since coming here. Amami answered, having seen and heard everything Naruto saw and heard through an HD television that was in her room and surround sound system. The energy she is putting off is the same as the kind Lelouch uses for that Geass of his, except whole lot more. It would be like comparing the chakra capacity of a genin against that of a cage. Not to mention she seems to have about as much control over it as you did back when you graduated the academy, in other words none at all. Naruto did his best not to react to the blatant jibe at his chakra control and continued with the conversation. If she has so much of that power, is it possible that she is the one responsible for giving Lelouch Geass? It definitely a possibility. But at this point it's impossible to tell without any more information on exactly what Geass is. Amami told him, though there is one that's clear. She continued, pausing for dramatic affect and rousing Naruto's curiosity. She seemed to be very interested in you. The kitsune said. What are you talking about? Naruto asked, just a bit flustered. Don't tell me you couldn't tell. The moment you appeared she couldn't take her eyes off you. Amami said teasingly. It could be that she's just curious about your jutsus and Sharingan, but who knows, it could be something else. The redhead finished with a shrug. Naruto didn't say anything back, choosing to instead to grumble some words incoherently. Back with CC after Kurama had left, she spent a couple of minutes trying to figure out a way to wake up Lelouch. Hey, just how much longer are you just going to lie there? She asked, pinching one of Lelouch's cheeks and stretching it out. Ow! Lelouch shouted, waking up and rubbing his cheek. Before remembering the situation he was in. Looking around wildly, and after not finding Kurama, the violet-eyed Britannian turned his attention to CC. Where is he? Where is Kurama? He demanded. Gone, CC told him simply. He left. Lelouch wasn't exactly happy with the news, as he was left with many questions and no answers. Were you able to figure anything out about what he can do? He continued with the questioning. No, CC answered aloofly. She had finally found someone that drew her curiosity. She wasn't about to let Lelouch ruin something that could finally be interesting. If he wanted to know anything, then he would have to figure it out for himself, like she would. Shall we get going? She asked, though it wasn't much of a question since she immediately turned around and started to leave. Lelouch watched the girl walk away for a second before following after her. Today for the second time Lelouch v Britannia had met Kurama, and just like last time things did not turned out like he had expected them to. In fact, they might have turned out even worse than when he rescued Suzaku. He silently wondered if this would be the same result that happened anytime he encountered the fox mask wearing Enigma. That's it for today, I will stop here.